we'll do kind of a circle, but if you want to stay by the tables, feel free to do whatever you're comfortable with. Typically how these hearings work is I'll start, do some logistics, and then we'll go into a little bit of overview about the Student Healing Council, what this is, and then we're going to just open it up to introductions and also anything that you feel like sharing, any questions you have, anything that you brought to talk about in this group. I know that the tribe today wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on here and some of the progress and also how this tribe is created. So, and if and when anyone would like to do that, we are happy to hand that over as well. Okay. We're waiting. Okay. Well, Shemai, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our July 2024 regional hearing for the California Student Healing Council here at Rock Valley. My name is Christina Snider-Ashtari, and I am Iwakana and Wakama, and a member of the Right Branch of Tamil Indians. I already outed myself with my family, so for those of you who know them, I am from the Dollar family. My mom is Eva Leslie Dollar, my grandpa's Homer Leslie Dollar, my great-grandma is Elizabeth Dollar. And we can talk about that later, or not. I serve as the Tribal Affairs Secretary for Governor Gavin Newsom. I'd like to thank the tribe for hosting us here today and for the really delicious meal. I feel very full and very taken care of, and it's a beautiful day, and it's nice to be inside where it's cool as well. So thank you for the tribe for your partnership in hosting us here today. And as always, thank you, Loretta, our amazing Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs team, for your work in coordinating this convening. We had a blessing earlier. And before we open up into introductions and discussion, I'd like to go over some logistics and framing for today. As a reminder, we are recording this convening. We have 2 cameras, so they're in the back of the room. And we will be posting it to the Tribal Affairs YouTube channel when it's ready. Please let us know if there's anything that you would like us to not record, and we can pause the recording, and you can say what you need to say off camera and off of our recording. If you say anything that you want us to edit out, we're happy to do that as well. We want this to be something that you're comfortable with. And so if you were feeling in a mood and you started talking about your tribe in a way that you don't want to be on the internet, we're happy to edit that out. Again, just let us know, and we're happy to make sure that it reflects what you would like to reflect. For those interested in following the council, ongoing updates including listening session recordings and summary documents are available at the Truth and Healing Council updates blog at truthandhealing.com. You can also get updates for events by following the Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Additional details, including meeting dates, agendas, and background information, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. Our next meetings are going to take place in August, and I'll hand it to Loretta in a little bit to tell us a little bit about those meetings. And those are shared on our updates blog as well. And now I'd like to remind everyone that in joining us here today, you agreed to adhere to the Council's Principles for Respectful Engagement, which I'll summarize in a moment. A copy is available for your use and review at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. Refusal to adhere to the principles may result in removal from today's convening. We don't usually remove people, but if things get feisty, we may ask you to step out. If you feel at any time that you need to step out, or you feel that you may be in need of assistance, please find one of our team and we'll help you get some air. In order to create a space where participants feel welcome, respected, and able to speak comfortably, we'll uphold the following principles in all convenings of the council. We ask that everyone here work towards sharing their stewardship. We ask that you engage in the work of the council and with others in an open and respectful way. Engage in behaviors that will make people feel welcome. Take care of your emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical well-being, and seek support as you need it. Finally, I'd like to remind attendees that as we work through today's discussions, this process is necessarily open to all Californians, but we ask that those who as allies ensure that they please respect the space and voice of California Native participants, particularly elders in this process, and particularly those who are from this area. For members of press in attendance or who are watching these recordings after the fact, we ask that you engage with this process with deference to the Native experience, and that you commit to obtaining consent and final review from the Native peoples that you hear from today. We don't want this to be an extractive process, and we hope that you'll assist us in creating a safe space that is open, transparent, and welcoming to all. Today we also have Covelo with us from Sikui. Do you want to say a couple words?
California Consortium of Urban Indian Health.
Oh. Stuck with the microphone again. I hate these things, but it is what it is. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Covelo. As Christina said, I'm from the California Consortium for Urban Indian Health. I'm Northern Sierra Miwok, an island band of Miwok Indians, and my role is to help the council contract with healers and mental health specialists who can come and make sure we have emotional and spiritual support. Unfortunately, we were not able to contract with someone for the day, so we'll just have to rely on each other. But I also did bring a bundle of sage if anyone would like to burn that or needs that medicine for themselves as we go through this. It's here and available. Thank you. Thank you. So now I'm going to introduce, sorry, that was very shocking. I'm going to have Loretta introduce herself, and then we'll have our council member who is present also say any words she'd like to say. And then we'll go over the California treatment healing process and what the point of a hearing like this is to kind of frame our discussions today. And then we'll open it up again for general introductions, anything that you'd like to say, any testimony you have, and we'll do that kind of for the rest of the day.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Loretta Miranda. I'm a descendant of the Morongo Band of Mission Indians in Southern California. My great-grandparents come from the San Diego area, so I am Peño and Kumeyaay. And I just want to thank Round Valley Indian Tribes for inviting us out here today and providing food and for you all for showing up. I currently serve as Deputy Tribal Affairs Secretary for the Governor's Office of Tribal Affairs. And again, we are just here to hear your stories, to whatever you'd like to share with us, whether that be the history of this place, your own truth and history, or current issues that you're facing and the community is facing today. I wear a couple of hats, so I will be taking pictures throughout this. If you do not want us to use or post your picture on social media, please just let me know, and I'll make sure that that does not happen. I am still learning, so I tend to take a lot of pictures in hopes that a couple of them come out pretty good. And so, especially during the introduction, so like while you're talking, I'll be taking pictures, and it makes a little bit of a clicking noise, but hopefully that does not make you nervous, and then I will calm down a bit after the introductions. So just thank you again for being here.
Right, and I will hand it over to Councilmember Sis if you'd like to say a few words.
I'm from the north of Lancaster, from Cloud River. My great-grandparents and great-grandmother, Ida Ward, her family was marched over here to Covelo during the big march that, I saw the Numco Trail, but it also included Redding area as well as the Chico area for people who were marched over here. And in fact, my grandmother had a allotment here in Covelo, 10 acres, that has been passed down to my cousin now. So we have land here in Covelo, and the initial thing was that, all the Indians didn't know what to do with it all, right? And so some of us also have been named on the Hoopa Reservation. Wintus are named on the Hoopa Reservation as original 10 groups of people to be theirs, but as well here in Covelo. So they didn't really know what to do with the Indians in the valley to get rid of it. So, not that there are some Wintus over here, that, in fact, some of my family members were here during that march. My grandma said that the guys went up on the hill, the tallest hill here, the mountain, and saw Mount Shasta away. And so they all came home. And so the histories that we share and that we hold as our places of being is pretty big. It's pretty wide, and we share a culture and a tradition that has the right to continue to live. And in spite of colonization, it makes it more difficult for us to hang on to what our grandmas shared with us, what our grandpas laid down for us, what they fought for. And now we're fighting a different battle in the field of the economy and the wish to have better economy. But at the same time, it's a wish to do away with our culture because that's not coming along with it. We're not upholding our traditions and our culture along with the prosperity that I can see. And we are still a wild Indian tribe. We have not succeeded to BIA. We are not certified by them nor want to be certified by them. But we in fact have our culture, we have our dances, we have our songs, we know our sacred places. We go to those medicine places to get healing medicines and to be healed by the Creator. And I think fortunately for us, we didn't really get impacted until the Shasta Dam was built. Then we were spread out and had to leave the river because it got flooded. But they didn't have any place for us to go. So we just kind of made our own way. And my grams, Florence Jones, kept the tribe together and kept us knowing our traditions and our places and how to use them. And so we're fortunate in that way, that those are the important things that we hang on to, the doctoring ways, the medicine ways, the sacred places. Those ways, money can't buy. And so, I've been on this council for 3 years, and I really want to stand up for the unrecognized and the disenrolled, because I feel like there's not enough Indians in the whole state of California that we can afford to drop them off, to banish them from our culture, to ignore the children who need assistance, the elders who need help. That we're not supposed to beat those kind of people. We're supposed to be taking care of our people, and our people means that anybody who moves to my area, we're gonna take care of them. It's not a blood lineage only kind of care. And where that came from is in the BIA, the blood quantities. But as you know, BIA also lost a lawsuit brought on by Indian girl who was born on a reservation, a rancheria, who wasn't quarter blood, but all her family was. And she won that lawsuit. But instead, the tribes kind of picked up that whole thing as like a blood quantum. The BIA don't have to do it anymore because the tribes are doing it. Because what? It's the easy way or the easiest way, but it's the most harmful. And so, this truth and healing for the state of California, we need to move it along. We need to get where something's coming back for us to not just tell our stories, because we've told our stories many, many times, right? In the 80s, there's a whole volume of books in Washington where all the people of California kind of told their story when they were changing over to this federally recognized system. And it's still changing to more and more only federally recognized people are eligible for services, for benefits, for rights, which also now includes tribal members whose kids are not accepted onto the rolls. So they have to watch their kids not get services. And I know in Ponca land, that's a big problem, because the grandmas, their grandchildren are not on the rolls because of whatever. And a lot of the tribes here in California, they close the rolls to their newborns. And so where does that come from? It's like, I'm still boggled by why would we do that to each other? And so as truth and healing comes about, I think that everybody needs to start saying, you know, how you feel about that. Let's figure out, what do we do about that? How do we fix it? Or do we? Or accept the fact that this is the way we're going, this is the way it's gonna be, and if you wanna hang on to your tribe and your traditional ways, then you're gonna do that in isolation. You're gonna do that without support. You're gonna do that because you love to do that. That's part of who the tribe is. It's not about economics. And even in the reality of our own tribe too, is like, once money starts coming into, and right now we're doing a fishery, right? We're bringing these fish back from New Zealand. We're taking the winter run eggs, we're putting them back on the high mountain cold waters. And so there's a little bit of money coming into the tribe. Now I'm experiencing those issues. It's like, we are the same people. We are not that money system. And we need to do what we always do, which is supposedly dance for those salmon, dance for the changes in life, we dance for our young girls coming of age. We're continue to do that. But it gets blurry with money in the view. But it shouldn't. But then, you know, now I'm recognizing, as much as I thought many of my people were along that lines of holding the tradition and going to secret places and dreaming those dreams, is that they too are somewhat overly colonized. And when that happens, you know, we find conflict in the directions. And that conflict comes about with who's getting what, how much money is there, I should get a fair share, all of that sort of crazy talk. But I feel like I'm experiencing that now as a leader. I'm the chief of my people. And I have to figure out, you know, what do we do about that? Because I see that a lot of the places that we've gone as Truth and Healing Council, see there's a lot of issues all over the state, almost exactly the same. And it's not taking care of our people. It's not including all of our people. You know, like my grandma said, when the California Claims case was fought, all of the Indians fought for all of the Indians. And now, since 1980, there's been a isolation, separation competition that has separated all of the Indians in California. Like my grandmas used to have other Indian doctors from Thule all the way up to Hoopa and back. And they would gather and they'd come and they would pray for California when the earthquakes were to come. They got all together at Mount Shasta and they prayed that that earthquake wouldn't come here. But now, it's like, we don't even know who the traditional leaders or the medicine people are up and down the state. There's been a break in that connection. And that's a sad thing for all of us because, you know, we should be relying on our own medicine people in meetings that are difficult. But, you know, we're gonna do the best we can, you know, and for us, you know, sage isn't that medicine that helps us. But it is a medicine, and it maybe would help, you know, some folks. But we're Californians. We should have our medicine. We should be strong, you know, standing together and making things right. It's gonna take all of us to do that. And so, I'm glad to be here. You know, we don't get to travel a whole lot, but my son and I, we managed to get to these 2 meetings on this place, and especially because my grandma has land over here that VIA grazes, but we're not recognized. Yet they hold the allotment lands. So it doesn't make sense. And now is the place, I don't know how long the governor is gonna, he's going out in January maybe? No?
About 2.5 years.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
That's good, because I got confused about the voting.
Everyone's confused.
Yeah, Trump confuses me. But I'm glad to know that. We have another 2.5 years with this governor, and, which also alleviates my fear about Chuck Warren leaving office, because he said as soon as the governor goes out, and he's the head of the fisheries, Department of Fish and Game, so that's good news. But we still need to prepare for a change in government. If it goes like it's looking today, it's like, we gotta figure out what are the tribes gonna do in California, and how we're gonna do that together and stand together, aside from all of these different issues. So I'm glad to be here, and I'm hoping to hear some your words and the things that you're thinking about, that we could do something together, or at least carry that to the governor's office and figure out soon what truth and what healing do we need. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember. So we're gonna talk a little bit about what the California Treaty Healing Council is, what the process is, before we kind of hand it around. And then also, if the tribe, or any of the, tribal council members here today wanted to speak, we can speak first. And any of the tribal members from this place wants to speak, can speak first. But we'll first talk about kind of what this is and why we're doing it. And I think it goes to a lot of what Councilmember Simpson was saying. So the California Treaty and Healing Council was created out of an executive order by Governor Newsom, which he issued in his first few months of being in office. He, in that executive order, apologized for the state's actions against California Native people and apologized for the genocide of California Native people. But in that apology, he also acknowledged that we need to understand from the Native perspective what was the harm felt in order to make it right moving forward, so that it wasn't just, an apology and now we're done and we move on and everybody's fine, but really taking the time to listen to California Indian country about what have been the different experiences, different histories. Hi, Councilmember. We'll hand it to you after I get my intro too. And there's some food if folks have just gotten here, and some water over there, and doctors in the hall. But so, really wanting to open up a process that is California Native led. There is a governing council of 16 members, so 12 members with 4 alternates up and down the state. The governing council, 2 of which are here today, are not representative of the community, but are directing kind of the high level, how is this gonna look, what subcommittees do we need, what is the final report gonna be, so that we have a process to kind of move the work along, but also wanna make sure that everybody who is a descendant of the first people of California, and is a first person of California, has a space, has a voice, has a role in this process. So through that apology, the governor called for the creation of this Truth and Healing Council. We engaged in extensive consultation throughout the state over the next year, and then appointed the governing council in late 2020 after kind of all of the COVID things were settled in. The council is charged with basically the history of California to be, to center the native experience. So instead of saying California started when gold was discovered, really saying California as a place that wasn't even called California, has existed since time immemorial, that the people here are most, diverse, and populous, pre-contact, north of Mexico, and what does that look like? And when statehood began, what did that mean for the people who had been here? And so what was the experience, in the heart of gold country on, in the Sacramento area? What was that experience and what did that mean for the people there and what did survival look like? For the folks who had already gone through the disruption of the mission period down in San Diego, what did that look like when California then became a state? So really taking the time to listen to different tribes, different Native people throughout the entire state to understand what does California Indian country look like today, and also how did we get here, and what is the state accountable for that we can start doing right as we move forward based on what we're hearing from California Indian country today. So instead of saying like the government usually does, like, oh, we see a problem, we'll fix it, here's, the Indian Reorganization Act, or we see a problem, we'll fix it, here's Indian boarding schools, really saying, what are the things that need fixing, and from your perspective, how do you think this can be accomplished? And then bringing the government into it and saying, okay, so we see that this is the idea, how can we do this from the government perspective, and how is this not dual from the government, but we can bring in private partners to be able to do this. And so really trying to figure out solutions from the starting from the Native perspective, which is gonna be multiple and diverse perspectives, and it's not gonna be one size fits all. And really then having these recommendations that come out of this process that will be implemented in the next year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and moving forward. So the council has been going throughout the state through listening sessions, listening to community, having hearings like this where we listen to the specific issues of this area, and also through quarterly meetings, which are a couple days at a time to really dive into the specific issues of certain areas. And has been doing that both virtually during kind of the COVID lockdown era, and then in person starting in March 2021. Jeez, it's been a while. So has been kind of going throughout the state, collecting these experiences, these narratives, these ideas about how to do things better, and will be issuing its report next year on the anniversary of the 175th anniversary of the state. So while some folks are celebrating, there will be this counter narrative of this is actually what happened to a lot of people, and this is what the state needs to do to make it right, which is not possible, but how do we start working in that direction? So I mentioned that there's a diversity of perspectives, a diversity of experiences, and so part of how this council is doing its work is through subcommittees. So there's subcommittees for urban Indians, there's subcommittees for people with disabilities, there's subcommittees for youth, for elders, and there's subcommittees for status and identity. So as Councilmember Sisk was mentioning, there are going to be some issues that are different just because there's people who have been disenrolled, or there's going to be some issues that are more challenging because there's folks that are not better recognized. So we know that there are some state policies where they're like, hey, you can gather as much as you want, we don't care on state land if you show us your tribal ID. Well, that's not going to be super easy for someone to do if they're disenrolled or if they're not a member of a federally recognized tribe. So a lot of what is under examination here is like, how do we create equitable outcomes, meaning if there are people that have more challenges because they don't have federal recognition, or they have more challenges because they have a disability, or different challenges because they're elders and so have different accessibility or facility with internet and other things, how do we create recommendations that are gonna get everybody, what they need to feel whole? So, subcommittees are looking at the whole picture and kind of creating those recommendations in a different way depending on what that circumstance is. So for example, if you have lack of access to fresh foods, like, what do those recommendations look like that are different? Does that mean that more infrastructure needs to be created in certain areas? What does that look like? And then also is looking at specific issue areas. So for example, access to justice in Indian country. What is that gonna look like that's different throughout the state? How are the issues different if you're an urban Indian and that you might be effectively invisible and not able to kind of access those spaces? And what does it look like to be able to access your resources if maybe you've been relocated, or maybe your tribe has been relocated, or maybe like here, there's a lot of tribes that were relocated to a different place. So how do we think about that in a way that's gonna make everybody feel like they're getting what they need based on this history? Part of this too is that we know that if a big report comes out, sometimes it's not worth the paper it's written on because no one's gonna read it and it's just gonna sit on a shelf and it's just gonna go nowhere. So if we do all this work and it ends up on someone's shelf and nobody knows about it, we'll feel like that is not a great thing. And we've seen that happen before. A lot of you have probably been a part of processes like that because they happen kind of every 10, 20 years. Something happens really big, a giant report happens, and then one person knows about it and they have all of the documents, but it just kind of goes nowhere. And so we want to account for that issue of how do we make sure that we are starting a movement that continues and it actually gets done. And so we do have a documentarian who's been following the quarterly meetings. His name is Jacob Kornbluth. He's been working with a lot of our council members, working with our locations to make sure that we're capturing kind of the diversity and the voice of Indian country. We have a little blurb if anybody wants to see it, but we're planning on having that come out in accompaniment with the report so that people who didn't read the report can watch this documentary and see a snapshot of what, from the first person Native perspective, the histories are, the experiences are, who are we today, what needs to get done. And he is committed to only showcasing California Native people in this documentary because we've worked very closely with him to make sure that it reflects this process and who we are and not what an outsider might want to see, and tokenizing kind of the whole thing. Is there anything I'm missing? Okay. So the other piece with timing is we designed this to be something that would get done with a little bit of time to actually start implementation if there's like legislation that needs to get done. And so that's why, because the governor still has 2.5 years, the report will come out next year and we'll still have time to put stuff into legislation, get some things moving before he's out of office. And so create the vehicles that need to keep this moving. And I think that's kind of it for the process. And I'll hand it off to Loretta to talk about our next 2 quarterly meetings and anything else you want to add.
Thank you. I did put some flyers out that list our upcoming meetings. Next month, it looks a little bit different than normal. We're having 2 quarterly meetings next month. We had to push back our previous May quarterly meeting because there was a conflicting event in Bishop. But next month, on the 1st through the 3rd, we will be in the Owens Valley area and Bishop and Big Pine. On the 2nd
what we'll do, we'll actually, council member, if you'd like to say a few words.
Open and Coach, Mayala John Harper. I'm a member of the California Truth and Healing Council and a citizen of the Federated Indians of Great Manchuria. You can't hear me? Sorry, I'll speak louder. I was born and raised in Ukiah, and my dad used to work up here in Covelo. This was probably over 55 years ago, so I'm really telling you my age. But I have a lot of fond memories about Covelo. We used to come up, myself and my 4 siblings, used to get loaded up in the back of our parents' car, and we came up from Ukiah every weekend and all throughout the summer. So I have a lot of fond memories of Covelo, and so I'm delighted to be here. Perhaps more importantly, I'm happy to be here to hear what you folks have to say. It's important to the process that we're engaged in, and I hope that some positivity will come out of it, and it will be helpful for you and for all California Indians. On that note, I'll just pass it on. Come on, Kayleen? You already did, okay.
And then, I did wanna note that we're working with, Jason McCannell, who's here as well, to do some research. And so, typically what will happen in these meetings is, someone will have an idea of something that they've heard about or that they wanna look more into, and they just don't know where to find it. So they'll say, you know, I know that my family was in this one place, and, you know, we have some idea of something that happened, we'd like to know more about it. We had one, elder, ask us about, you know, we know that all of these slave ships came up and took all our people, and then they were sold in San Francisco, but we don't know who it was, you know, we don't have the records of this. We have all these, you know, we have the laws that talk about indentured servitude, about slavery, and we'd like to hear more about that as well. And, and so what he's been doing currently has been going county to county to actually get these documents that are records of indenture of Indian people, and he's been finding them because they're kept at different counties in paper copy, so you can't search for them online. It's been a labor of love, I think, but also 58 counties, it's quite a lot, I'm gonna let him talk a little bit about the other things that he's been doing in his other jobs, but also this process as well.
Hey everyone, thanks. I want to say this is my second time in Covelo. Had a really beautiful visit up here. I think it was the fall of 22. I was invited up here actually by the UP committee to talk about what at the time was my most recent project, Digital Atlas of California Native Americans. It's a pretty cool resource, I think. It has a lot of information, a lot of sad stuff on there related to genocide, but also some really cool cultural information, things like trade routes and trading relationships people had. And also, any tribe in California is welcome to approach me if they want to put their own page on the atlas. So far, I have, I think, 6 tribal atlas pages, and I'd like to get the other 100 together, before too long. Anyway, so I got to teach at the high school here. I went to Ms. Rolinda's Native American Studies class for seniors and put my atlas up on a big screen in there and had a really good time. And spent some time. I was given my necklace at the time. It was my transition from being a tie guy to a necklace guy. So this is a real significant place for me. And I'm really happy to be back here. Anyway, getting back to my point. So as I mentioned, I built a digital atlas. I'm a geographer by training. I spent 8 years in the last governor's administration in his office, ultimately, rising to the position where I was sort of his main researcher. So now I'm your main researcher. I decided to transition from governor governor's office to helping this community, because I think it's the most important thing that I can do, that anyone can do right now in California. I work on, as a geographer, I work on place names too. I'm actually appointed on the Federal Advisory Committee on Reconciliation and Place Names, the Department of Interior. Just last month, we were up in South Dakota and Wyoming, Black Hills area, voting to ask the Secretary to rename what's currently a bad name, Douglas Tower, to Bears Lodge, which reflects the tribes as one of the most safe places on Turtle Island. We're working on derogatory names too. This process started with the action to remove the S word from the map in 2022, and we made a lot of recommendations for other words. For instance, the D word was used in California. Those are kind of sitting for the moment. Anyway, I work on place name changes both at the federal level on that committee and also at state parks, where my job is in the records office. I guess my mic just suddenly came on. And so I'm on the re-examining our past team at state parks. If there's a place that has a bad name, named after a bad person, named badly, according to your people, you should come to me, especially if it's inside state parks boundary, because we can do something about it. I can help you work on that process. And now the council's research. I've been to pretty much every one of these meetings the last, whatever, it's been 2-3 years, and every meeting people come to me with different questions that they like to answer. It might be something they want to document, it might be something they want to verify, any number of different things, or just help with the process or understanding, where to go for something. And I'm very responsive on that stuff to whatever extent I can be. Looking for these apprenticeship or adventure documents kind of did, as Christina described, come out of this process. It's a large project. I'm not going to finish it before the council before it's done. Because we're talking about loose leaf piece of paper from the 1800s that are sitting at the bottom of bankers' boxes in county archives. But these are your relatives, being basically sold into slavery by the county courts. And almost all the cases I've been finding, we're just in the first 3 years of the Civil War, so they knew that that slavery was going to be outlawed. So they were scrambling to create these legal documents to make legal as apprenticeship the relationship to slavery that already existed. That people were buying children from human traffickers, and of course, make it this is an official relationship. So I knew where there were 16 of these papers when I started. They were in Covelo County. I think at this point I've found about 45 across different counties. Like Sonoma County, real close to us, here in Covelo County, obviously some of Sacramento County. If you have family stories that your relatives, your ancestors were subject to the system, you should come to me, because I might have actually found their documents already. And if not, I might run across them. I'm building a database, digitizing the names. You'll have the first name of the usually child who was brought into slavery, and the last name, of course, the landowner, which I think is how a lot of people actually got their last names in this community. Anyway, it's sad, it's scary, finding these documents. I can't even describe what the sort of spiritual experiences, coming across this very cold legal document, sort of ending someone's freedom, and being part of a government that did that, to this day. Anyway, it's probably more than I needed to tell you, but that kind of gives you an example of the stuff that I do. I'm a general researcher. If there's a question, I can at least start to answer it, or at least maybe find the right people to answer it. If there's a document that's missing, or a map or something from the past that you'd really like to have, just come to me. I got cards, and you can come meet me in breaks or after the meeting if you have something to share or that you'd like to look into. Anyway, I'm very blessed to be here, so glad to be back. Thank you so much, Round Valley. Carrie, I've had my necklace. I've carried it. I've gone to all the meetings. I've carried Round Valley in my heart to to Honolulu, to the Black Hills, to the Grand Canyon, and all over California Indian country with this wonderful fruit. So just know that you're thought about in a lot of places that you might not be aware of. Anyway, I talked too much. Thanks a lot.
Two other things, and then I will be done talking pretty much for the day unless folks have questions. But the subcommittees, we have subcommittee meetings that are in-person quarterly meetings, and they're on the day before, so they're Thursdays.
Yes, Thursdays, so August 1st and August 15th will be subcommittee meetings in those regions.
And our subcommittees are open, and so if folks haven't joined them but would like to join them, you can join them whenever. You may have to catch up a little bit, but again, we want everyone to feel like if they wanted to have a voice in this and wanted to be a part of it, they can. If the in-person meetings are mostly to have people be able to connect with each other. A lot of the meetings are virtual, but the in-persons give people the opportunity to kind of get that, community, and then also have more efficiency in how the decisions are getting made for their subcommittees. And then in January-ish, we'll also have a week-long summit where each day will be dedicated to a different issue area. And we'll be inviting experts in to take a look at some of the draft language for that chapter of the report to make sure that if there's anything that needs to be included, if there's anything that's included that shouldn't be included, that everybody has the opportunity to weigh in, even if they couldn't be here for the whole kind of multi-year process. And so that will be kind of an early time for folks to weigh in even more before, the September release of the report as well. With that, if there's anybody from Round Valley, from the tribal council who had anything they'd prepared to talk about today, I'm happy to hand over the mic to you folks before we kind of do the intros around.
I'm not prepared to say anything, but hello, I'm Suzanne now, and I welcome everybody and welcome the group again, the Truth and Yelling, and I just send up prayers for all of us, and let the truth come out so that we all can heal from generations. And I am a descendant of Sandy Pollard, who was put on the walk over the hill from, with your grandmother. This is my mother and my auntie, and so we are descendants, and we were originally from this valley, but we've been here for over 150 years now, our family, so I just welcome everybody and thank you for all coming.
Anyone else from the council or from the tribe that wants to?
I'm not on the council, but I was talking to Christina earlier. She said that they visit places. They do like to hear some of the story or some of the history of that area. So I just really briefly, for those of you that don't know, and for our members that do, I always start these talks by saying all of our families may have a little bit of different version. And so I'm not trying to say what I say is the exact version that happened in Round Valley, but this is some of the stuff that my family passed down to me. So I just like to be clear on that, because otherwise, like I've done these talks before and people say, that's not the way that happened. Like, okay, don't shoot the messenger. But anyway, if you don't know, there's a map of our reservation that's on the wall over there. And those areas that are shaded in red show the tribal areas. That map doesn't distinguish between airship land and just tribal land, but that's our acreage that we have right now. And as you can see, our original boundaries was river to river. That shows that it's diminished over the years, and that's actually what they call it, and legally, I guess, is the diminished Round Valley Indian Reservation. And so, right, that shaded part equals about 32,000 acres of land that's part of our reservation. So, but anyway, and that's a good map. I looked a lot around to find a map that we could put on the wall when we have guests to say, this is our reservation. And so we finally found out when we blew it up, and it served its purpose. So one of the other things I'd point out, and just looking at some of the pictures that we have around here, we had an Indian school, this picture right here. This part of the old Indian school that was located right over here where this other building is. This is just part of it. There was a big gymnasium that was part of it too. And anyway, a lot of our people went to school here. That we weren't integrated into the public school system until like, I think it was like the 50s. 58. So thanks, Mitz. Anyway, so we had our own school system here. This picture right here represents something they call this the agency. And I always like to point out to our visitors that when you look at this hillside right here, when you go up there, you can still see that same hill. So all these buildings were located up in that area. And the other thing I point out is when you go through Sacramento and see government buildings, they all look the same, man. No matter if it was around the turn of the century or currently right now in Sacramento. Anyway, these are all government buildings. And they had a government school there back then. And a lot of our student kids were pulled out during the area where they were trying to just break up the families and stuff. That's part of all of our histories. A lot of our kids were sent there, and of course they just left and went home. So that's why now when they look at moving kids, I mean later in history when they looked at moving kids and families away, they took them way away. Because this experience right here was that although if it's in the same neighborhood, they'll just go back home. And we experienced that a few years ago. We had a group home, or health center sponsored a group home. And one of the things the Indian Health Service told us is that don't have your same kids that are in your group home from Covelo, otherwise they'll just go home. And we found that out to be true. So that's why we had a network that we could take kids from other areas and then they could take our kids, but we were working together to try to work with them. Anyway. And then this gentleman that just walked in is our internal president, Mr. Lewis Wible. And so I'll give the microphone to you in just a minute. Anyway, so anyway, like I said, this is just a little bit of our history. We have some of our artifacts that we found, and there's been plenty of digs around here. I think every tribe has experienced that. A lot of these big universities have our artifacts, and we have a right to get them, but we have to have a place to keep them and put them. And that's always a huge obstacle. It's still a huge obstacle for us. We get contacted almost weekly by some of these universities saying, hey, we got all this stuff, but legally we can't get it unless we have a place to put it. And so we're working up to that end. And then another thing I'd like to point out in this room is see all the pictures that are around up there? Those are veterans that we asked the lady that's in this picture right here, and this memorial is located down in our Hidden Oaks Park. But this lady, her name is Kathy Cook, she kind of spearheaded this whole project of let's get pictures up on the wall of our veterans that served in whatever armed force unit that they were in. And so anyway, it's still an open-ended project because we still on our website ask people to any of our families, if any of our members were in the Army and stuff, please give us a picture, but also give us a little bio so we know we can put that on there too. So we know that we don't just have the picture, we have where they served and what family they were from and all that stuff too. And that's worked out pretty good, but there seems like there's a lot of pictures here, but we have a lot of our members that served in the armed forces over the years. And one of the other things that I like to point out when I talk like this is some of our, and if you look at our cemeteries, almost any cemetery around the Indian reservations, you'll see all of these veterans in there. The Indians went into the Army and served in the United States. But the funny thing is we have World War I veterans, and they served and fought and died for this country, and they weren't even citizens until 1924. And so that's a weird dynamic when I think about it, that we weren't even citizens, but they were allowed to go off and fight and die for the United States. So anyway, in truth and healing, that's something that needs to be, brought out, and the healing process. It's been brought out, it wouldn't be the first time, but it needs to be brought out even more. And these pictures represent a lot of our people that were in those various organizations, and Department of Army, Marines, and all that stuff too. And then on the back wall, This is a picture that was started, I believe, by our executive secretary, who just retired this past year, and she worked for the tribe for almost 55 years, like 53, I think it was. It was over 50. But Alberta started this by doing the research, when you're talking about research, and went through all the minutes and figured out and tried to do it chronologically. So those are, and I don't think they're all there, but it's a pretty good collection of our former presidents. And they used to be called chairman, and then now they're called president for whatever reason. So, but anyway, so that's just some of the stuff in here. And Round Valley is one of the oldest, largest reservations. I think Colleen mentioned earlier that some of the Indians were brought over the hill from Chico. There's a memorial outside on the building about the Mount Walk, which is happening in a couple of weeks, isn't it, Ron? Oh, September. Okay. So anyway, that's been going on for, this is almost the 30th year that walk has been coming over, reenacted, coming over the mountain where Indians were forcibly marched. So when we talk about the Trail of Tears for the Cherokees that everybody knows about, all the Indians know that there's many, many trails of tears over the years and how Indians were treated. We have, and that's just one. We have other marches that were brought from like Fort Mendocino on the coast up north. Indians were marched down. So that's just one of our Trail of Tears. But anyway, so I just wanted to kind of touch base a little bit on our history. Formerly we were called Namclot, and then we became the Round Valley Indian Reservation. It was established by executive order around 1873. And so anyway, and there's various things that you hear too. You ever hear that, okay, there was 4 original reservations in California, Round Valley, Hupa, Tule River, and one of the mission bands. But I've also seen, and I think some of our other people have seen in researching it, that in some places it'll say 5. There were 5 original reservations, and I've seen that in print. So it's either 4 or 5. Doesn't really make a difference to us because we know we were one of them. But anyway, but we don't, I mean, that's just, a fact, and it's something that was designated by, the United States, and the first was the Department of War, then it went to the Department of the Interior, and became the Bureau of Indian Affairs. But anyway, it's just something that we live with. Some of the stuff that Colleen mentioned earlier, I agree with totally, because we have problems with the BIA all the time. I've got stuff on my desk in there that these I won't even go into the details, but it's just crazy. I report this to the tribal council, who are my boss, and I saw that this gets crazier and crazier. They always seem to be, if there's a new person that don't know what the hell they're doing in the BIA, they assign them to Round Valley. Like, how does that happen? Is that a coincidence or what, man? But anyway, so we're dealing with this one new lady right now, and she's just off the wall, man. But anyway, I could go into more depth on that, but I don't want to just talk about the microphone. I don't like microphones anyway. But anyway, but I would like to turn it over to our president to say just a few words.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry I was late. I was here at 12 and stuck around for a while, but I had another meeting. I was pretty important, had to get to, but it's over and I'm back. So I'd like to echo a lot of what Mr. West said. He was our president for 8 years. Now he's our TBA. So he knows a lot. He knows what's going on. He's been involved in all these committees and stuff like that for I don't know how long, 20, 30 years probably. But it's like one of the perfect persons to have.
I'm only 29.
Yeah. But Michael, welcome you guys. Good to have everybody here. And this is a perfect thing, for our valley right now for the truth and healing. So thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, what we typically do is everybody in the room introduces themselves so we know who's in the room. This is also the time to share whatever is on your heart, any testimony you have, and typically will kind of take us through the rest of today. And if you don't want to say anything, you just kind of want to observe, you can say that as well. And we also have the ability to record your first person testimony if you'd like. We have some of that that I've had with us. Loretta has offered to stay past the time of this meeting to record if anybody is interested in doing that. We did this at the request of our elders committee or elders subcommittee, which Councilmember Harper is one of our leads on that, and really wanted to be able to provide a method for people to record what they want to record. You can either submit those recordings to the council just as is, or you can ask that you take those recordings and not submit anything to the council because you don't want to share it with others, but you want to keep it for your family or for your tribe. Or you can have a version that you submit and a version that you keep because there might be sensitive information that you don't want being made public. We've kind of thought about it this way because if you submit it to the council, it would technically be a public record because it is a public entity. And so it would be something that if someone requested that information, even if we didn't post it publicly, we would have to provide it under state law. So if you don't want your information getting out, but you do want to record things for your family, for next generations, for your tribe, feel free to come to Loretta afterward and she can sit down with you or just set you up and then you can do your recording. If you don't have time today but you'd like to do it in the future, we can also talk about that, and we also can lend out some equipment as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it around. I am going to say too though that my family too, one of my great grandpa was taken up here and then ran back home, and then my great grandma ended up hiding at the coast when the militia was driving people up. So we're from the kind of Sonoma branch that was taken up here on your Como side. So we didn't stick around though. So we'll start this way and go around. I'll hand here.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much to Brown Valley Indian Tribes for hosting us today in that gracious lunch. My name is Lisa Morris. I work for the Coastal Conservancy, and I'm here to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here to observe and just listen and learn. Louisa Morris. Thank you. I received Frazier, been a lifelong member here in Brown Valley. Jim mentioned organization was established. It was established in 1856, and the whole valley was the reservation was the non-salt, called non-salt at the beginning. And then the influx from the gold rush era, people started coming in, especially men with cattle and sheep, and they got pressure from the government to reduce the size and open up for them. So it was changed around 1873 to like the map there's over there, which is still looks like today. And then about the boarding schools, they were built, started in 1894 at the ABC. The children 6 years and older that lived here were taken and they stayed from Monday through Friday. They got to go home on the weekends. Other children brought from Willits and Kaya, wherever that age, they had to stay there for 9 months away from their families. And in 1914, they say a group of little older boys started a fire and burnt the school, so it closed. And from 1914 to 1926, just the school for the Covelo children was held at the Methodist Church. And in 1928, the old reservation school, what she was talking about over here, was built. And the children from 1st grade through 8th grade were educated there. And in 1936, there was a beautiful auditorium built. Jim called it the gymnasium, but it wasn't a gym, it was an
auditorium, had a stage, it was beautiful. And in 1958, it was, we had to close and join with the town school. And I was in the 4th grade. I got to go in the 1st and 4th grade, and I could still see the whole building, the layout of the playground, and the basketball courts, and the softball area. It was a good feeling, and we had real good teachers. In fact, Carl Delgado, who was the first Indian to graduate from Chico University over there, he was the principal for I'm not sure how many years. And then there was another principal that was there a little shortly after him. And when the children had to go to school in the fall of 1958, although they were fine, it was the parents who were having the trouble. They didn't want them to come together, but that was the loss they did. Been together ever since.
My name is Judy, her niece, and she's our historian, so you can ask her all the questions.
Hello, I'm Loretta. I'm a Yuki descendant. The Yukis were actually the first tribe here. This is our ancestral land. And we've been here, anthropologists feel, for 20,000 years. And the force of the immigrants into the valley, especially we've had to deal with Snider-Ashtari and forget Henry's first name. He was a superintendent there. Kind of shows, if you follow their history, you can see that they knew each other on in the east before they came here. And the gold rush started just before they moved here also. But Snider-Ashtari wanted this land, and he wanted the cattle that was sent to the Indians. For the Indians, they went to him also. He took over Eden Valley, but it was through him and the California government that the Indians were massacred, and all the Indians in this area that were massacred were reported by Ben Natalie, and he has all just the documented ones. We know that there were more massacres than that. And on the Native American Heritage website, they have all of those massacres and all of California Indians, their massacres. But Sir Ernest Hastings had a lot of influence, and so he had a lot of influence with the first governor of California, and the first law that they passed was the Indian Indenture Law, the Indian Slavery Act, and so I heard that the blacks just got paid $1 million to $1.5 million for any of their ancestral involvement in slavery in the state of California. And I know that the Japanese, when they were in internment camps, they got $20,000. So I'm looking forward to that time when the California Indians might get their portion of their money. And I should say though that it's been really hard for our Yuki people because we had around 20,000 people here, but after Hastings and the governor of California, they actually paid people to kill the Indians. Jacoby was one of the famous ones, the Eel River Rangers that hunted the Yukis down. And so there's a lot of suffering that went on. Our tribe went from, like I said, 20,000 down to 300. And then the other tribes were moved in, and we became a minority in our own land. And so a lot of Indians have had a hard time because of that. But Yukis, we lost our government, we lost our language and culture, we lost the power of our saving our resources. And even though this says it's a confederated tribe, confederation means each tribe is an individual and then they all come together, and that isn't what we are, so we actually should change our name as far as confederated, because we're not, now we're all sort of intermarried. And, but I don't like us to forget the Yuppies because they provided the home here for many people. And the valley was, the whole valley was a reservation, but the people on the south end of the valley, the white people, they wouldn't leave. So they turned it back into public lands, and that's how the reservation got reduced to the size it was. And then we've lost land through people just trying to survive and having to sell their allotment land because they owed money to the grocery store. And so a lot of things going on like that. Anyway, I can go on, but
Road, let me get on Bible, you animals, my depression, and the women of the tribe, that's funny, I'm just here to support and an observer, and just, being able to all at the same time, just to build it, thank you.
Super, hello, and, hey, tonight. My name is Nicole Whipple, and I'm a member here of the Grand Valley Indian Tribes. I am a Yuki, a Valley Yuki descendant on my father's side, and on my mother's side, we are into Kankau Maidu, Nawalaki. And thank you, Kylie, for sharing this story, because we joke in my family, my children, you know, they carry all of my bloodlines from my mother and my father, maternal and paternal. But as we moved into a new system in our enrollment, when we look at their tribal certifications, they're all different. And so we joke, we tease my oldest daughter, she's the only one that carries Wintune on her tribal enrollment today. So we're like, oh yeah, I have a Wintune, and the other one, she only has Yuki, so oh, you're Yuki, and then I have all of my mom, Nomalaki and Maidu. I do think they have Yuki on them as well, so it's kind of funny how those things work out as we try to, you know, advance with technology when they only allow for so much. And, you know, going back to that conversation of that, it's really embarrassing that we do these things to ourselves, and claiming boundaries and territories. And so, you know, for the truth and healing, that's where I really appreciate the conversations that we had when I was working with the Youth Committee and appointed as a secretary. We met with, you know, we had a meeting with Truth and Healing and talked about, you know, how do we go into these co-management agreements without the land grabs as we have all these nature-based solutions and all these great opportunities. And so today I really want to discuss, you know, our Eel River cultural resources. Like Deb was talking about our loss of land, we also lost our land on the railroad because of the acts of Julie shared some really good stories with me too, as well as how, like, you know, people needed groceries, so they would save up their land deeds, and then if they couldn't pay their groceries, people would just take their land however they could. And so I was researching, you know, getting information shared between from Deb, other elders, thank you, Misty, a lot of information. I was reading all of Maggie's work, other work from Willie Ballard about how those land grabs were happening with the railroad system. And so I'm here to ask for support, and we really do not want to see, our Eel River tribes do not want to see the Great River Trail built on our Eel River.
Oh!
It is a cultural resource for multiple tribes, multiple counties. It's one of the largest water basins. Free-flowing fish, you know, we're here to protect our fish habitat. I work for State California Salmon, and, you know, we are anti-version. Sorry, Christina, I know you're Russian River, but I can't see. But if you know our people in the valley, you know that we have been struggling in our house. Our president is also our housing director, who can about poor water quality here in the valley that we have struggled with all of my life. I remember, going to my grandmother's house in the housing and we couldn't wash my clothes with white clothes because they would look the color of Miranda's shirt because the water quality was so bad. So it really hurts my heart to think that it is so important for the Russian River to continue to take our water, to strip our resources so that they can water the trees. And then to think and to falsify that the sediment of a system that shouldn't have been there is going to cause harm to damage side of the river.
Oh.
The Russian River was never intended or meant to be part of the Eel River or connected in taking the water from around the Snider-Ashtari tribes. So those are the things that I do with State California Salmon. I fight for fish-dependent people and our tribal policies. And so I am here to ask for support for the protection of our cultural resources, and to see our cultural resources listed as endangered and protected species with the use of DEP as best practices and science. And I've been speaking with agencies and other EPAs who are sharing with me that it's difficult because of the fact that we don't have the data. Sitting at a board hearing on voluntary agreements supporting our relatives from the Sacramento and the Shasta Rivers, because those are our ancestral territories as well. It was a beautiful thing to hear Anna speak on and in support of our tribal people and supporting our CTHC and practitioners and traditional ecological knowledge and our practitioners to be respected equally as those who hold letters. So those are the things that I'm working on. I really would love to see our known cult be a monument, federal monument, our Eel River, a federal monument, as well as for our Yuki people, the coastal Yuki territories from 10 Mile Beach all the way up to Usal to be protected as well, because wind energy is not gonna help any of our water resources there either.
Hello, my name is Raquel. I am a local Rock Valley youth and part of the Rock Valley Youth Travel Council. It's fundraised by Young Horizon with the local housing authority that we just got back from the National Community Conference back in Oregon, that I am a proud recipient of United Travel Youth for the 25 under 25 this year. I received my award up in Oregon with my youth council. And then this year I ran for the Miss Teen World, and I believe I scored in the top 10. I earned about 1,600 points. And then I met with a lot of people who were going through the same thing as us. So when I was over in Mexico, I was meeting with these other diplomats, and some of them were from New Zealand, and they came up to me and they were crying, and they said that they understand what we're going through as Yuki people, because they're so far behind up. And there, out here, we are kind of blessed more, where we get fundraising and help. If we have issues, we can come together and address them. And here she was talking to me, the leader was. She told me, where we have issues, it takes a while just to even get help from our national government. So I felt honored to talk to her and all that, and then even though I didn't win for the Miss Teen World, I did put Covelo or Round Valley back on the map, even just in the county, and I stepped out there. And I've been stepping out there. And right now I'm working on another project with the 25 under 25 to when I was supposed to do my project, it's supposed to be coming soon, I'll have to meet them. But my project was to address the drug and alcohol issue in the community, especially with the young people, and work with our local tribal government, and including our local county sheriff and our local health center. So I'm just here to observe, but also like put my opinion out there to see. And then I'm here to represent my council, because a lot of them are still young and all that. And I'm the oldest one besides my advisors. but I just had to represent it and see what's happening. Thank you.
Your puppy looks just like the dog I had when I was your age.
But he's not mine, he's my sister's at work, I have to babysit him.
What's his name?
Poppy, he's stubborn right now.
My dog's name was Peabody.
My sister had him for about 3 days and then we had to go to a conference or showing him my uncle for a week. But he's stubborn, he don't wanna take a nap right now.
I'm just gonna change up the battery real quick.
Not new puppy, but, oh, puppy.
Poppy, wow.
Hi, I'm Julia Russ, and I'm a member of the Southern Years, and I'm on the tribes like Wailaki and Naumaki. And I have, testimony that I'm gonna read that, I'll do later, and I'd like to record it. My colleague and I wrote it, Angelica Korsky, and she is a teacher at a middle school, and so we have some specific issues that we wanted to bring up for the Truth and Healing Council, but again, it's kind of lengthy, so I'll do it later in the court.
And I'll stay here till it gets not too dark, so I'll be here for a few hours.
I won't be that long.
Amanda Price. I'm not from this tribe or the tribes here, but I plan to be your neighbor soon. And, I'm staying up on the river in a little cabin right now. And yesterday, an eagle flew over the river while we were sitting, my husband and I, outside playing cards. And I just felt so blessed. I think the people here are so beautiful. And the country here is so beautiful. And you guys are just blessed to be here and born here and have your family and your heritage right here. So I'm honored. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Vasquez, and I'm a member, the charter member here. I wasn't raised here, I was raised in Santa Rosa. My father was from Santa Rosa, and my mother was from here, and her name was Leonora Lincoln, and then she married my father, who was Clarence Senior. I can't tell a lot of history about here. I used to come in the summertime to my grandmother's, and her name was Amy Blanche Lincoln. She was a good one before she married my grandfather. And I used to come up here in the summertime, or my mother would come when my grandmother was sick. So I don't have a lot of history about Covelo. But the funny part was when my mother got older, she came home and she started being sick. So, because I lived in Sacramento for 16 years, I'd leave everything and come take care of my mother. And so the history for me is kind of, I only have a little bit of the history of my family, and we are Wailaki kind of house. And my father is Tomo Wapo. So, for me, it is beautiful here. It's beautiful, and the people can be beautiful here, but then there's so much, I don't know what to really call it. A lot of stuff goes on that people don't really talk about. You know, and there is abuse, there is alcoholism, but you know what, we can heal. We all can heal from every thing that is thrown at us. It's like arrows being thrown at us as a tribe. And I believe that we have warriors. I have 2 sons, and I can say one of my older sons, Michael, he's been through a lot. He's had a car accident, was beaten up by a bunch of teenagers, you know, and nothing really had taken place with the law. And that, I feel like that was wrong. But you know, he's a survivor. He started working at the casino. He was like a security. Then he moved up to floor manager, and now he's a commissioner for it. And I'm proud of my family because they do have a good background. And I cannot say all of it in this moment, but you know, I'm proud to be a tribal member here. We do have a lot of resources. we do have a lot of people that really care. You know, they just don't openly show it because maybe that was the way they were raised. I was raised different, and on my father's side, he had 2 sisters, and they were very loving. And so it's like a culture shock because my grandmother, Amy we didn't call her grandma, we called her Amy. You know, and on the other side, my grandma Renee, we called her grandma, my aunties, you know. And so when here, it's like everybody just wants to be called by their first name, and that's a disrespect. You know, it starts for families. You know, we're not perfect people, but we're not gonna be put down anymore. Years, our ancestor suffered a lot for us today and our future. I have grandchildren, I have 8 granddaughters, and I have 3 grandsons. And their future, you know, and I know a lot of you have great grandchildren. But as I look at it, we just need to come together and you know, stand our ground for our tribe, our council, and that's what I have to say.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Reeves, and I am also a Yuki. And I'm just now learning my history, you know, from the Yuki side. And one of the reasons why I was not able to do that early on, I looked at some of the books and saw what had happened to us. It was too painful. I shut the book up, and I didn't want to learn anymore. But since with the opening of the Yuki committee, I've learned a lot about our history. And I think we should all be proud of who we are, what tribe we're from. We should learn our history and be proud of our history. You know, because a lot of us, it was painful. But now we have a chance to make amends. We have a chance to change that and do something good together and work together, because I think one of our problems was we were turned against each other. I didn't like you because you were this tribe. You didn't like me because I was a Yuki. And you know, all this misinformation, and then it was put there for a reason, to weaken us. And because we were weakened, we could not stand together. But if we learn to stand together and to fight together and to work towards helping each other, we will be stronger. We will be the winners instead of the losers. But that's what I would like to see happen with our new generation, for my grandchildren. I want to see them to enjoy life. We need to all enjoy life. And even though our history is painful, I'm enjoying my life. I'm, you know, wanting to move ahead and make new discoveries about our tribe and, you know, the happenings for them. But I would like to, at some point, give my story. I don't want to do that right now because you might be here all day. But thank you.
You ready for this? My name is Ronnie Hostler. I'm just like everybody else. I got to put my tribe down. It's Round Valley is in my heart. I'm on the road up there in Hoopah. There's a lot of people right in this valley that still throws in my face that you're from not here, you're from Hoopah. Why don't you go back where you belong? Well, this is where I belong. My father's side was there. But I have a lot of respect for everybody here, and I go by num language. You know, every family has their discretion, but we're not. I don't know if there's any full-blooded people anymore, but it's your family's discretion what you want to do. And our family all comes from Mary Duncan, who was a num language. My grandfather, Fillmore Duncan, was a Yuki, and I'm proud of that. I always let people know that I'm Hoopah. When I go to Hoopah, I'm Hoopah. In Round Valley, I'm Numlac. So that's the way I've been doing my life. But I want to go back to my 80 years, or 81 and a half. I'm not as old as some of these elders in here, but I can remember remember from day one that we were, at this reservation school. And, I never did hear about, what tribe we are. I never hear that. I never heard that word, Numlaxes or Wailaxes. I never did hear none of that. It was a while before I did realize that, when my grandma Mary, actually we were raised in the field headed down on Short Creek, my grandmother's house. 1950, when my grandfather passed away, he willed a house up on Agency. That was to my mom. But, our family was raised with another family. It was the Fraser family. They had a mother, Aunt Bee. We all knew her as Aunt Bee. If we could ever get another person like that back in this valley, you'd be amazing what you see, what she did back in those days. The community was all together. There was no fighting, nothing. I never did hear about a roundhouse, even at the young age. I never heard anything about a roundhouse. But I heard younger people talk about a roundhouse here, there, around there. I never did see any of my elders dance. My grandfather had a dairy farm up on Agency. That's where I was raised, on Agency. Well, he had a dairy up there. And that's what I grew up in that dairy place there. My job was to, when you run all the cattle into the barn, they had a manger. My job was to put hay in the vinegar. Then I had to run along behind them, and they put their heads in there and lock their heads in, while my grandmother milked the cows. That's where I was pretty much raised until my grandfather passed away, and things started changing with my rest of my family. That things were sold. So that's what I was raised up there. That old school. That's where I stayed. That's where I live now on that map where you showed you the old Indian school. And I can pretty much pinpoint where our house is right now by just looking at that old thing. And a lot of those buildings were like foundation. Up on the hill, that big tank up at the water tank, that's where we got all our water from. Never had to worry about chlorine water, and stuff that they put in the wells, in these springs. Well, now we didn't have to worry about that. We drank that water years, and in fact, in the summertime, we didn't have to do salt water, but that water was warm all the time. Ice cold, but there was stories where, I remember Hank Green one time said he turned his faucet on and the lizard come running all over the house. So we didn't really know what we were drinking in that water. But they had a big cement tank above the Agency there where the spring water comes down. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I had to take where the Philistines stayed up there, and there was a big canyon there where the pipe went through. We must have put, I don't know how much baling wire and inner tube on those pipes to keep them from leaking, but in the big tank, I was the only boy on that place. My brothers always had the old girls, you know. So they would put me down in that tank. The tank would fall like that. I would have to put me down in the tank with a bucket and shovel and get that much silt on the bottom of that tank. Except they told me the big green lizard that was in there, leave them in there because they clean the water. I didn't dare touch the lizard. I'm just, it's so much different now that the way the change in people from that day to this day, right to this day, there's like they said before, there's a lot of separation. People are saying things about different people, and that's something that I don't think will ever change, because we have a lot of young people coming in and has their own discretion on what they want to be, how they want things run. And I always said, people that run this valley right now is our tribal council. And if we don't stick with them, and, of course, we had a lot of trouble too in their tribe is voting and stuff like that. But that can be taken care of too if, these people, step up and think more about the tribe, the people that are working for, besides working on their own selves. And you all know me, I'm not one to hold back on what I wanna say, so, that's me, and, I'm gonna, I hate to put this mic down. I'll hand it over to this young man.
I like that, sorry.
Oh.
He's my uncle, so I don't mind either. My name's Iris Hoagland, that was my father, I took him home, Steve. I'm Wailaki, but Debbie's my cousin. And over here, Wintun is my cousin too. So we got Yuki, Wintun, we're all related, I'm Wailaki. When people all around the table here, everybody, we're all people, right here, we're all family.
My niece.
Well, run thick, we run thick, but the spiritual part of us runs thicker than blood and water. So a lot of us depend on prayer here. That needs to be spoken in California. We still pray. We still pray, we still fast, we still ceremony, we still gather. We may not be at every ceremony out there, but we have in our home. And then, the reason I heard about this, the word national, got my head. So, we've had many elders working on a project for the Wailaki people. They're gone now. They passed away. Corey Cordova, Emmett Simmons, my mother, Margaret Hilton over there, and Fred Downey. They're gone. So, like Jim was saying with BIA, we got new people standing up trying to figure it all out. But along with the Eel River, what Nicole saying is that with myself, I have 3 grandmothers buried up that way. Alder Point, and those areas in this area is all Wailaki. There's historical sightings, and I'm a little worried about the Redwood Trail going through California. I say no in my life, no. The risk factor alone is just enormous. And then to think that we can make money off of this, you know, the railroad had a good time with it, that's great. But the human trafficking that's going on right here in the valley, you don't need that area open. You can fall, you can burn, you can get cut, you can get lost. Run into a bear, a cougar, snake, whatever through there. And it takes 2.5, 3.5 hours just to build a fire to make smoke signal. Or a helicopter or something, you know? And then so, what we hear a lot of history about right here, I'm from here, I grew here, my people are here. My people are, we still want to go home. Even these are my cousins, they want to stay here. This side wants to go somewhere back where grandmothers are. That trail is gonna dig them up. They're full of jewelry, there's graves. And the museums are full of our people. I'm begging California to change that. Don't do that to us again. Canyon City Round Valley has gone through enough. The people have come from everywhere here. The Yuki people have hosted and they're overwhelmed. Look at the place. I was able to go back to the Lost Coast. There's mushrooms on the ground, but not in Round Valley. And so, what I say in my heart is all these land bases saying, we had to march there. And the government doesn't want to give it back to the individual tribes. Well, then give it to the reservations that you force those tribes to go to. Because we can't stand alone, maybe we can as clans for a sort of area that has historical land right there with bones, DNA, you know, whatever it takes. But
I'm just asking California to change that. And then also to educate our children in the curriculum. In our schools, the truth has to be told. Because our Indian children, look at, I'm 59 now, and I'm just finding out where my grandma's buried it. Some of it's my fault. But if we taught earlier in the school system about, it's not shameful to be Indian, and if you're gonna be Indian, you might as well be a cattleman. Not important anymore. I work with a lot of young people just to honor them, encourage them to live. Don't die. Don't die. Don't kill yourself. Don't cause revenge. And don't kill. And it's a powerful thing here in this valley right now amongst our people, and it is heavy. It's heavy. And so I say, if California write the curriculum different, put it in the public schools. The third world country, still in the cities, they still need them. Our Indians are everywhere. Everywhere. We're not dead. And then the history of all of California, how mining's all the way to Columbia River. There's that trade trail. That's how we survive. And good thing for their weapons are coming on up, because Crescent City, the big old killing machine was coming this way. Cause massacres from Oregon, coming on down. Kill, 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 massacre, massacres. Well, my grandmother stood, her name was Sally Bell. She stood and watched the killing machine kill her grandfather, her father, her mother, take a sword and cut the sister's heart out when she was barely learning to crawl. And stood there with her sister's heart in her hand, full of fear for days. And they came back after her. Where'd they take her? It's the same story. San Francisco, the trails. Well, we're not all dead, and her descendants are right here standing. And we want justice too. And we want to go home. If not, then put all these land bases back to Round Valley, because they're not going to give it to us. And that's about it I have to say. Oh, the other thing is, there's some people here that are finding out that the Redwood Trail is a good way to make money. To have a house on Dos Rios, to have a house in Alder Point, and use these little dockets that you track, you keep a count on the people who are on the trail. But that's risky, really risky. Not really thought of whose ancestors you're gonna walk on. Maybe you're from Round Valley and you're all set up, and you know where your grandfather, go over there, visit her. Her grave's right there. My grandfathers they're all up here. But for the older generations that we can't, still get to our grandmother's graves, it's shameful. And that's we're trying to get recognition up there in the Humboldt, southern part of Humboldt, and these elders have gone through a lot. As I'm looking at all their paperwork, they worked hard and hardly got anywhere. You got some landowners up there saying, "Oh, we're going to give you this land," but it's like a nugget here, because I guess it was kosher back in the days to have property owner, be a property owner. It wasn't kosher to be Indian; you're supposed to be white. But well, anyway, for myself, I was raised up in Ames. We marched from 68 to 78 for health centers, for Indians' rights to vote. And my father here, I remember we rode horses in Lakeport, and he had to lift me up like this because the cops smashed their horses against him. But even our horse could fight, because she was a res horse. She reared up like that and did this to the horses. And my dad just headed out down the street with the horse, and there we went. We did the same thing in Santa Rosa. But Lou over here, Lou Knight, his mother, she was on a boat with us one time in Alcatraz. All us kids were in there trying to get away from cops. Shut the electricity off in Alcatraz and told the kids, "You gotta go, get the kids off."
we were playing on the second story of the prison there, and my friend, she fell, Richard Oaks' daughter, she died, and, we had to get off, and we were in the boat, and my cousin Rose and me, we were hitting our head, and it was boom, boom. So we got to the marina on the other north side of, Alcatraz there, and the people were good, they let us park on their docks and run through their houses to get to our cars to get home. Little kids fighting, and I don't tell these stories, I don't, but today, yeah, so, but I'd like to see, like curriculum change. And in California, if Newsom can, or whoever, can't give our land back and recognize that we all have a home here in California at one point, somewhere, and we're forced, literally forced in life, so, that's all.
Oh.
You got.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Julian Miguel. My grandfather was Byron Tillotson, and my mom is Elfie Manuel from Dry Creek. And my grandpa's from Eden Valley, Usman, Society of the Hill people over Eden Valley. And like everybody's been saying, we're all relatives. It's just amazing how we're integrated. He says he's Hoopa, in Round Valley, he's uncle. This is my auntie, these two Reeves, and she's her grandma's my great grandfather's sister. And so I've been praying since '96 for healing in Round Valley, and healing for our people. And then my Creator brought my beautiful wife, and our first prayer mission was a 40-day prayer fast. And we went into hidden oaks, where it was just grass and trees and nothing there, but a brush house that was built. And we danced, they bring, the Browns bring the big heads from Elam here to dance, and they sang our grandfather's songs back to us. And right after that, it was, I grew up out of the valley in Fairfield, Long County, and didn't know I was Native American. And the history that I was taught, I didn't know there was, really Native Americans. I heard that they were bad, that we were savages, and I didn't want to be a savage, so I didn't associate with that. And then one day, I was in school and playing ball and everything, very talented, creative, versatile, talented, play sports. And I was at this young man's house, nice, beautiful house, and he's playing Ivy League baseball in state. And this is what I wanted to do when I was a kid, is go to Ivy League college. And I was playing football in the playoffs, and this young man asked me, "What's your nationality?" And growing up, I never heard words like that. We never discussed who we are or where we came from. My grandma never said anything, even though she spoke the language at the table in a little round circle. I remember them in a little round circle speaking the language. But they were always on edge to who was going to come through the door. And it was a trick to me, because I was like, why are they scared that who's going to come through the door? But now I realize, those people that would come and tell them they can't speak that language. So they were terrified to speak the language. And my grandma, she would always, when we were sick as children, she would come and she would go to the creek and go get leaves and bark, and she would boil it. And every time she did that, when we were sick, 2 days later, we were miraculously healed from any flu or anything. We just stayed sick long with grandma. And so this young man, he said, what's your nationality? And I told him, I think I'm Mexican, and I think I'm Indian, but I'm not sure, you know. And he said, well, that's too bad. I said, what? He said, yeah, that's too bad. Not too many of your people, right? Your people are in college, or in the Ivy League college. Maybe you should think about doing something else. I was 12 years old. It just crushed me. Took me a while to heal. I cut my hair and everything. I didn't speak Spanish anymore. My mom made sure we had a second language when we were growing up. And I didn't speak Spanish. Today, to this day, I still I'm speaking it. I know it's there, but it's something wrong when you speak it. And my wife, she's full, and sometimes I pick it up, sometimes I don't, because it's too fast. But anyways, we've been praying, and we had 40 days of praying in that valley. And we prayed for this. We prayed for the healing of our people, to know their identity, and to break off the shame that was put on us, saying we were dogs, animals, cattle. And so I love Miranda. I love who I am. Like I said, I'm taking on coastal New York, on Tomo, on Rock, and Tomo. And it's just such a blessing to see it coming. The only thing I would ask the state of California, the governor, and the lawmakers, and the federal government, pay restitution for what you stole. You guys took a people's idea from the East Coast and wrote it into law. From the tribes over there, the Book of Peace. And you incorporated it into America's theory, because it's only theory to you, but to us it's our culture. We live by those words. We live by the words passed down from our ancestors and our elders. Those are our norms. Those that what brings us peace and healing is to know the truth. Because in our tribes we didn't know any lies. The lies stayed outside our tribal people. Because those that didn't act right, they were put outside and telling them to act right and then come back. You know, we don't have a homeless situation because our grandmothers take care of us. Right? We don't put our elders in any convalescent homes, or we shouldn't put them there. Because they're our elders, and they're the ones that give us our history and teach us how to act, how to be. So for me, it's just, you know, if the United States of America would quit speaking with that forked tongue and start telling the truth and bring our truth out, and truth and healing will happen.
Creator, we invite you. Creator, you are the only one that can fix, mend our hearts, heal our hearts, catch our tears, right there back of the enemy has want to destroy us, your loved ones. Oh, my name is Loretta. I was minding my own business, not being Indian, living in the big city, in an education, behaving as much as I could as not being Indian. Whenever I saw a drum or I saw a feather, I wanted it. I ran through it. Whenever I wanted to dress as a teenager, that's what I wanted. I want my hair to be cut, I wanted my braids long, and I earned the nickname in high school, La India, the Indian. I never thought nothing of it. I noticed that I was a minority and I'm like a wild little person. So I wanted to not be that. That's why I went to school, learned English really well, I thought, get a good education, and marry a white man. Now I felt I succeeded. I have my bachelor's degree, I have a white husband, I'm good now, I made it. This is it. Sitting on top of the world, I make good money, have a good career. And after I thought of sitting on top of the world, I wanted to know Father God. Because I felt a deep sadness, a deep depression. I felt after all that education, all that respect I got, after I got the white husband, I was missing something real big. Right in the middle of me, I need something and I don't know what it is. Make a long story short, I had a vision. It was a lady in Washington, D.C. that happened to be in this place in Washington, D.C. where they make the laws in that room. And they began to look at me and they said, we need a Native American, and I felt such a hypocrite. It's like, I am not. Don't call me that, I am not. You need somebody else, not me. And I had a friend with me and she says, listen. All right, listen to this lady, whatever she's saying. She began to apologize to me for things that I was not raised with, understanding. I only watched the movies, Cowboys and Indians, and I felt sad for what happened to the Indians. That's why I didn't want to be Indian, because they always lose. They always get killed. Or they're the bad guys that kill the white people in the wagons. I don't want to be that. But in those days, I had beautiful, long, black hair. So I, could not really strip myself from that, who I was. So when the lady was saying things to me that apologizing and saying these things, and when my friend said, listen, it's like, okay, I'm gonna listen. When I listened, suddenly, out of me came out this ladies, they had their hair long, and they were saying something. It was like a chant. And in this chant, they were saying, we waited for this apology for a long time. So I thought, I lost it, because I looked around, like, where did they come from? As I looked back at the lady, they were attached to my belly and on the side, and I looked at her, and I looked at them, and they disappeared, then I looked at her, and it's like, so right now I gotta explain to this white lady, why am I acting crazy? So I thought, okay, wait, maybe I just tell her what I just saw, and then, let it be whatever, So I said, because I felt that it came out from my belly, so I said, I see my ancestors that are saying that they waited for this apology for a very, very lost. And I was changed that moment. I was changed. I understood who I was, what I was, and what I wasn't. So, long story short, he was my friend, and he was here around Valley, and I asked him, I said, I'm a dental hygienist, I work cleaning teeth. And I asked him, I said, do you think they need a hygienist there? And anyway, when I asked him to bring my resume to the clinic, and they said, we've been looking for a hygienist for many years, full-time hygienist for many years. Are you sure you want to work here? I said, yes, I'm sure. Why do you want to come here? I said, well, because my fiance is there. It wasn't my fiance, but I let him know that I meant I didn't want to come, because by that time it was like, okay, if I can do anything, any little bit to help, I will do it. I was, I could make in the city many more, hundreds of dollars working, in one day. It's like I came here, it was like, what? Even people say, are you sure you want to move there? It's like, yes, I'm sure I want to move here. My parents say, where are you going? What? You just graduated? Yes, I know. You know that I'm a wild one, the weird one, whatever. So, I fell in love with Round Valley. I consider it a privilege to work here in any way, shape, or form. Come along with him and help him whatever way I can. Let him do whatever, all the coaching he wants, everything he wants to do is like, the answer is yes, and just do it. It's for the young people. I want the young people to, just whatever he has to do, he does, and I consider that a privilege. And I love Round Valley. I love the people. When I see them, it's like, you may not believe this, but this is my truth. Especially when the babies, you see their faces, it's like, I am seeing the face of God in these babies. It's like the magazines do not, they don't have real beauty. They have to see our young women. Our young women are beautiful. Man, when I see magazines, beauty magazines, this is not it. They haven't seen our girls. Our young men. So, anyway, I'm in love with Round Valley. That's all I gotta say.
So she mentioned that I was white. I worked on my decolonizing my mind for a long time, and my tan. Eight years later. The right woman.
Happily yield the mic to Ruby and Julie and Uncle anytime, and all of you. I have invited Christina a couple of years ago to coming to witness and hear and learn about the truth of healing and all the horror and pain and all the possibilities that could come out of it. I worked in the environmental movement my whole life. We do Friends of the River and the Environmental Defense Fund. And I was introduced to Native American culture, first on the Stanislaus River when they built the New Orleans Dam. And there were cultural heritage issues. And then for over 20 years on the Klamath, trying to bring back the salmon and people. And then recently working with a group on the White Tribe trying to bring back the name of the Body Walk River, recently called the Mad River. And I'm just here because a couple of years ago I met Christina, and this truth and healing story and revelations, the whole, I would say, much of the world is interested in this right now, and their ears are up, and it's in conversation and media, in part because of your work and your presence, and so I was just glad to be invited, included. Thank you, Brown Valley Administrator and executives, and all the participants. Nice to be here.
Let's see. So it's kind of, my name's Clarence Britton. It's kind of odd, or not strange, I don't know what you want to call it, but I was just going to say I'm here to observe. But, you know, it's like, because when she was talking, I'm going to go around the room. I don't think I need this list. I was thinking, oh God, don't pick me first, don't pick me first. Yeah, and I wanted her, and then she did go over there, and I was like, wait, I wanted her to pick me first. You know, it's like, okay, I just want to say, I'm here to observe, so I don't have to say anything, and then just let it all happen. Right? But then by the time it gets to me now, I'm feeling all of this stuff, you know, because, you know, just what my people that are here have talked about. So I know there are real issues and there are real stuff that's going on. But for me, and it's crazy because, like, you know, I don't want to, you know, it's like I don't want that label. You know, I don't want to see it. You know, all these labels that people say that we have, and or how people look at us like, oh, you guys are the Indians from Covelo. You know, oh, you know, it's because I hear that a lot of times. Oh my God, Covelo is such a bad place. And I'm like, this is God's country. You know? But I mean, they say, I know, like I go in a lot of circles, different places, and people are like, oh, we just pray for you guys over there. We just pray for Covelo needs help so bad. I'm like, wasn't there just a mass shooting in your backyard? You know, like it happens everywhere. You know, I'm like no one's immune to all this stuff that's going on. But anyways, I was grateful to hear all the stuff that I was grateful to hear what Mitzi had to say. I know she can name stuff. She's got it like that. You know, we have those historians in our families, you know, keepers that know for our families, you know, because we're different families, they even know we're all related. Yeah, you know, I'm not just Yuki also, but I'm Wailaki, and it's crazy because, you know, growing up, I wasn't going to talk much. I'm like Ronnie. Uncle Ronnie, my cousin. My hoopball cousin. It was crazy because, yeah, he was raised up here and I was up in hoopball when I was little. Brought back here, but, I forgot what I was going to say. Just all of the, you know, and just hearing all of this stuff, it's like every time I start hearing this stuff, it does something to my stomach. I should have ate first. But because I guess they're real issues. There's the issue that each person carries. Like I said, me and Iris were raised up here, and my cousin Lisa. You know, she lived in Santa Rosa, and it was a big deal for us. Yeah, our grandma, and yeah, we called her Amy. I don't know why, but that was her name, right? So we called her. But my grandma on my dad's side, we called her Grandma. You know? But Amy was Amy. Yeah, that was home. My native way was home. It was family, and you know there was always food to eat, and you know there was always mud playing outside, and. But going to visit Aunt Miranda down in Santa Rosa, that was a treat for us to get out of Covelo, to get out of the sticks, get out of the poison oak, and go play in the parks in Santa Rosa and eat at the little bakery on the corner and get candy and all this stuff because we didn't have it here. But for me, growing up here was all about family, and we were told too, and you know, it was I guess my grandfather he worked. Which was my step-grandfather that raised us as his own. He worked at the mill here, which a lot of the men did. There was a mill out there, it was Mill Town. This was mill place. But him and my grandma, they talked about, you know, the old ways weren't necessarily the old ways. I mean, it wasn't gonna be the way, the world was changing, right? Things were happening, they saw it, they knew, the world was changing, and we couldn't live, you know, the way we lived forever. We had to, you know, we're gonna have to go to school, we're gonna have to get an education, we're gonna have to keep up with the world in order to live in the world. That was the wisdom that they gave us. And so, my he had his way, you know, and you know, he didn't really school us on his way, he just showed us his way, he just lived who he was. And I always said my goal was to be the kind of grandfather he was. You know, he was a man. He was a man's man. He raised us. He stepped up when my dad couldn't. And so, no, that's what I was going to say. You know, my dad, Wailaki's, Yuki's, they were considered enemies. I remember when I said, so Mom and Dad were really enemies. How did that work out? You know, but I didn't know him either really when I was little. So, you know, so I was scared of him because he was our enemy. Because that was on Mom's side. Mom was born until she passed away a couple years ago. But you know, getting to know my dad and I love my dad all over, you know. But I just wanted to. I'm hoping through this stuff that we as a community, because we are so intertwined, and yeah, I have all of the different tribes also, Como, Winkie, Yuki, you know, Wailaki, Nomlaki, yeah, Ronnie's grandma and my grandpa, brother and sister, everybody's in Cuba.
Oh, God, I'm here off.
And he's here off. That does it. That's too far north. That's off the family tree and into the water. What I'm hoping to see through a lot of this stuff is that we as a people can heal, like, because of the traumas that happen just within our own people. You know, we can blame white people all day long for everything, but when we start looking at each other and start loving each other again, and start taking care of each other, and stop hurting each other, as Indian people, you know, stop turning our head when someone's hurting. Someone's hurting, give them some love. You know, give them a drink of water. Give them some candy, the sugar might be low. You know, give them something if they're hurting, they're crying. You know, don't turn your heads. You know, we got people passing left and right. You know, I had a son who passed not too long ago. I still don't know how to deal with. How do you deal with losing a son? I don't know. Somebody tell me. You know, I can say that all day long, and people go, oh wow, sorry, I don't have an answer for you. You know, and so it's like, wow, what do I do with that? You know, so it's those kind of things. You know that. You know, do we even have a support group for men or women or parent or people that that have a son or a daughter that passed or whatever? You know, because I'm not the only one. There's a lot of us. You know, and I reached out to them. I've tried to create those group support groups or whatever. So I'm like, how do I do this? I can't do this alone. I don't know how. You know, and so those are some of the things. And I know getting back on Deb, I worked with Deb last year. Just getting back to the garden. You know, because we should be growing. We should have big old vegetable gardens.
Yes.
Hello, somebody. We should have big vegetable gardens here. But now I got a sign on my door saying they're gonna turn on water off. We need water. You know, our elders. You know, there's an elder over there now has COVID. She needs fresh water. You know. So, and these are just little issues that are happening just amongst ourselves. You know, we can bring people from outside and all they want to tell you all about the trauma that we're in, but until we start doing something about it, it's blank. You know. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Questions or
So it's almost 4. We have a couple more minutes if anyone thought of anything while anyone else was talking and wants to add.
I just wanted to say that Clarence and I are first cousins, and he was talking about our step grandfather, and yes, he took the role of being our grandfather. He was good to all our family. He was a gentleman. And I stayed with him for a while with me and my kids. And I told him, you know what? There is no more gentleman like you. I don't see that. Because the future, you know, it's like the generations don't care. All they do is want, and we're supposed to just give it to them. No, you need to earn things. Because I came from a different generation than, of course, of today. And I grew up hearing a lot of things from my elders. So I just want to say that I believe this community, my tribe, my council, I believe that we can do a lot. We can do a lot together, but we just need to communicate, you know, more. We need to just say, hey, how are you doing today? That used to be like here, because it was a different culture from Santa Rosa to here, you know, because I was being raised in Santa Rosa, but my grandparents lived here. And so, you know, when everything's like friendly, you know, and then back in Santa Rosa, our family had my siblings, there was 9 of us, we had to grow up like Caucasians, I'm gonna say it like that, because, you know, I was in the generation before the application, what race are you? Well, they never put Native Americans. It was always, are you Alaskan, Indian? You know, I'm like, what? You don't even live in Alaska. There are natives that live in Alaska, but the California natives don't live in Alaska. My main point is we had a loving step-grandfather. He was a gentleman, and I can say that about him. He was never any other way. Everybody knew him. He said hello. He'd give a helping hand. And I just want to say that I remember what it used to look like here in Covelo. Very beautiful. You know, and it's still beautiful. It's just greed came in. Because a lot of people all they want to do is sell them. I'll say it, because I don't do that. I don't grow, I don't sell, you know, I don't do any of that. But that greed, that's a greed that, you know, and then people want to watch their stuff, oh my, you know, somebody's gonna steal it. You know what? Be free, because we are free. We came from a long way. Our ancestors made prayer for all of us relations, all of us here. And we need to hear that. You know, we need to hear what the truth is. And the truth is yes, we were knocked down ages. Our ancestors fought for us to have what we have today. And now, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to continue to be greedy? Because you know what? Things change so fast. I've witnessed so many things in my life. I'm 64 years old. I just turned 64. And I'm happy who I am. But when I lived in Santa Rosa, we were different. My parents raised us like we were native. But the thing is they taught us to be competitive. My brothers I have 5 brothers, and they were very competitive. I was the youngest, and I was competitive. Because that, you know, they weren't better than me, and they weren't smarter than me. That's the way my parents taught us. And it was always like, oh, you're Indian, and I said, yes, I am, and I'm proud of it. You know, I was a very quiet girl until I was like 15. But now I have a voice, and I'm going to say what's right. And I'm going to live what's right. Because I know the Creator. And He knows me. And He knows all of you. And we can heal. We can move forward. You know, we are the people that have been here for a very long time. But we're always trying to be put down. But you notice we're still here, everywhere. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
So something that's been coming up in this couple of days that we've been up here, but then in a couple other places, is that we're hearing from communities effectively, because if we're not right with each other, then how are we gonna be able to communicate that outside of Indian country and get the things that we need? So, I don't know that the answer needs to come today, but if everyone could think about what that would look like and what you would need to be able to start working through that, I think that's something that could be a part of the recommendations. Not that the state comes in and fixes things, because that's not ever gonna happen. But if there are things that, that you all think could be helpful, that could be funded by the state or by other people, or that there's programs that nobody's been thinking about that just need to be created, or that you wanna create a program but you're not sure how to do it, and so like we can think about that together. I think this is a good opportunity to be thinking about what do you need, and you know, what kind of time do you need, what kind of space do you need, and it doesn't need to be in writing in the report, but I think however you think Indian country or your tribe specifically, or your tribes specifically, or your families, what you need to start kind of working through this stuff. I think we want this process, and originally we designed this process to be something where, like full disclosure, we were seeing, or I was seeing how much division there was in California Indian country, and I felt like if we didn't have something that could bring us all together as like a common enemy, it was gonna be really challenging to move forward, because gaming was bringing us all further apart, disenrollment was happening, recognition was happening, just, you know, lack of recognition, and then, you know, everybody outside of California acts like California Indians aren't Indian, which is ridiculous, and so like there's all of this stuff going on. And so part of what we wanted to do with this process was say like, hey, there's actually like one person, like there's one entity that did a lot of really bad stuff to all of us. So let's start there, and we can all work against that, and hopefully that'll bring us all together. And so that's what we wanted this process to do, is like, let's stop looking at each other as the problem, because we didn't start the problem. We're just processing like what happened to us without a lot of help, and we're all processing it ourselves. And so how do we figure this out collectively? So I think as we kind of leave this meeting, and as you think about all of this, and as we continue through the next couple of months and think through what real healing looks like for our people, for our families, for our kids, for future generations, for our parents, for our grandparents, what do you need to be able to start that journey? You know, the state doesn't need to be a part of it, but like, what do you need so that if we try to build on this progress, that it's not just gonna create more fighting and division?
What you're saying makes total sense, yeah, I see that, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that just needs to be a part of it, I think, where you say, when you say that, you know, that's us, as a people, we need to, you know, let those down. I mean, we are competitive people, we're supposed to be, right? To a point. But we need to bring some of those walls down. Yeah, how do we do that? Those walls are there for a reason.
Yeah, we're like still in survival mode.
We're still in survival.
I recently met a guy named Tom Keeter, a historian, and I like this quote when he said, "The best thing to do about asking what to do for Native American people, or if you want to know what happened to them, ask an Indian, and quit asking all the historian, anthropologists, and archaeologists people." But not this all. But on the other hand, thank God for them, because we need hearts that research and want a desire to do it. Because if we want healing for me, I have to go home to God, my Creator, because I need healing. First thing is, who am I? So colleges, museums, let us heal. If big money, as our director said, we need a facility for all of our things to come home. And then maybe it identifies who we are, what we did, how we did it, and when, versus we're doing now and how we're following. We still follow seasons. Our Alaskan people are telling us it's a month and a half ahead of time now. The change in this, what do you call it?
Climate change.
Climate, new word. Anyways, just being more prepared, and that helps by knowing, not knowing. We don't wanna know everything, cause knowledge hurts. That's what God told Adam and Eve. You really wanna eat that, you're gonna know a whole lot, it'll hurt you. But anyways, that's why I should think that, ask Indian people, and I love and appreciate what you're doing by asking the people, all the areas where they're at, what they're feeling, where they're coming from, and everywhere. And I just thank you and appreciate you for being here today and your crew.
I was just wondering, recently we got a letter from, it was signed by, I think, one of his deputies, but it was coming from Rob Mata, the Attorney General. And it said that he is inviting tribes, the Dear Tribal Leaders letter, he's inviting tribal leaders to come to a session. And basically, I forgot the name of it, but it was something about Public Law 280. And they wanna hear from tribes, like how that's affected tribes and all that. So I'm wondering, what's the difference? I mean, you guys I applaud you guys too for coming out and meeting with the Indian people in their homes and their home reservations. What was the difference? I mean, what is the difference between this effort and the effort that he's trying to do? Do you know that, Christina?
Yeah. So this effort is kind of a global look at, so basically at the beginning, when we kind of created the executive order, we kept it open-ended because we didn't want to decide what was the most important thing to talk about. There's been at least one other effort in the United States to look at truth and reconciliation. We call it truth and healing because we didn't think that this could ever be reconciled and didn't want to put that in as an expectation. That effort was very narrowly constrained to the child welfare system, and that was the main Wabanaki Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Also, only I think 7 tribes in that area that were involved. And so with this effort, we wanted to keep it open-ended and really have it be driven by what are the priorities of California Indian country. It turns out everything is a priority, and so that is what is going to be reflected in this holistic report of both, the truth-telling and then the recommendations on how to start this healing process. We envision that it'll be iterative, meaning it will continue to build on itself. So every 5 years, have a look back of, did we get all of that done? What can we do now? And that it will not be kind of what we're doing now, but it will be seated kind of outside of government with ties to government, so it can get government funding, but also can get private funding, and it's unrestricted to fund the recommendations. So instead of saying, we have a grant program through the state and you have to do X, Y, and Z, there's just, this is funding for this recommendation, no strings attached. So that it's more reflective of, not having waivers of sovereign immunity, not having federal things that are always problematic. So this is the long answer. So what this process is kind of globally, what are kind of the top 100 recommendations across the areas and across those subcommittee lenses that need to happen in the next, 1, 5, 10 years in order for us to start moving forward. And it can touch on Public Law 280, but that effort, the Attorney General, by the way, is a separate elected, so it's not under the governor, it's a separate elected entity. His purview is basically public safety throughout the state. So he has he's supposed to work in conjunction with the governor, but also he has his kind of own agenda. And he has been tasked by Assemblymember Ramos to start looking at Public Law 280 and how it's working and not working. To back up a little bit for folks who don't know what Public Law 280 is, which I think everybody does, but I will just back up. In the 50s, Congress delegated certain authorities that were federal authorities to the state of California. and that included criminal jurisdiction over Indian lands, but did not also attach funding to that. So they basically said, California, you're in charge of this, but also you don't have any money to do it, even though it's gonna be more work. And so California, when they don't get money, says unfunded mandate, not really something, you can't do this without money. So, a lot of the criminal, justice gaps that happen in California Indian country, also when the federal government did that, it also disclaimed basically its, kind of direct support to tribes to do law enforcement, so it's why there's so many gaps for tribal law enforcement and tribal courts in California as well. So tribes are not getting support from the federal government for criminal justice. State isn't really supporting because it both doesn't really know it has to, it doesn't have funding to do it, and also has really challenging and complicated relationships given its history. And so, what the state is doing now collectively, and including the Attorney General's office, but also including the legislature under the leadership of Senator Ramos, is looking at that history and seeing where are the gaps that we need to start filling in, because it's been too long and we shouldn't have this problem anymore. So there was recently a hearing in the California legislature about the state of Public Law 280 and implementation, because the state technically is required to implement. And so they brought in retired professor Carol Goldberg from, she's a former professor of mine from UCLA Law, who's kind of the expert on PL 280. And they're creating a PL 280 task force to better understand from all of you what are those gaps in Indian country. So is it that you call, the police and they never come? Is it that, you can't get access to the records that the state has of who is living on your reservation and might actually be, have a record? Is it that, you're not getting the access to the justice system and the courts that you need in order to keep your people safe? And so that's what that effort is. So it's similar, but we, again, where we have recommendations on public safety and justice, we will have that be something that is a legislative ask, or we'll say, hey, we recommend that the Attorney General do these things. We kind of leave it to them to be able to flesh that out a little bit more. Does that sound right?
So, I was just thinking that letter was signed by that gentleman who's the special agent in charge of the VA for California. His last name's Lorenz. I think his first name's Chris. Anyway, he signed that letter inviting tribal leaders to that meeting. And it does say they're establishing a public law 280 task force.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so the funny thing to me about it is about half of our council went and attended a meeting, including President Whipple, attended a meeting in Ukiah about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
It was the exact same type of meeting. And
that was probably their MMIP at first.
So, well, they talked a lot about 280 and across the spectrum, not just they did talk about MMIP, but they talked about a lot of other stuff too, like things that are happening on the reservations, and we're not getting support, with that. And even the tribes that have law enforcement agencies, and Hupa was present, UROC was present at that meeting in Ukiah, and even though they've been established, way longer than our police force here, they're saying we don't have enough resources to handle this huge influx of basically crime that's coming in. So out of that meeting, a lot of tribal leaders were questioning, okay, so we came to yet another meeting and we expressed some of our stuff that's going on. So what's going to come out of this, And so now 6 or 8 months later, we see a meeting in Sacramento that's based upon Public Law 280, and it says crime and public safety. Both are listed on in that memo. And so, but I'm wondering, I think some of our council members are scheduled to go to that, which is good, but on the other hand, what's going to come out of that? So I'm only raising that question because whatever comes out of that comes out of it, but I'm only raising that question because I hope that you guys are on a totally different path here. And when you guys come out with your report and have recommendations, that there's substance to that, and that Indian people will know that, you know, this is something that's good, and we could follow that, you know, jump on that train and follow that.
Yeah, and I think for us, we're committed to making this something that actually is effective for Indian country. And already the things that we've been hearing have led to things like, which aren't perfect, so I'm gonna caveat it with that, but are like the nature-based solutions funding, the $107 million, the broadband funding that's coming to Indian country. And so, things are happening in conjunction and because of what we've been hearing in these meetings, because we don't wanna wait for the final report and recommendations, and also where we see that there are like current ongoing needs, we want to be able to also, and I hate to say this term, but for lack of a better term, pilot things that have never been done in California, so that we can kind of get people acclimated to the fact that like doing something that restores ancestral lands doesn't mean that like literally everybody gets kicked out of California. It means that like we are, you know, Native people are reclaiming places that make sense for Native people to reclaim right now, and then maybe reclaim more, and then you know eventually we kick everybody out. But
not just California, but the whole continent.
oh yeah. But so you know, I think we'll put that in the report. But so and then things like you know the funding, and so where the governor has some authority in that MMIP space, for example, is in budget and stuff. So the MMIP funding that tribes have just gotten some awards for, if those are things that are successful and work out, that's something that can put in the report. It's like we need 200 million in this on what you know, like that type of thing. And so already certain things are being tested to make sure like when they go in there that it doesn't look like, oh my gosh, what is this? It came out of nowhere. People who are already implementing will say, hey, we're doing it. It's not perfect, let's figure out how to make it better. But it doesn't look weird for us to be putting another 100 million into land back and, you know, co-stewardship, co-management, all sorts of these kind of efforts. For the other initiatives, I don't want to sell them short. We're not leading them, so I can't make any promises, but my understanding is that one of the meetings that you all attended was likely for, there's a 5-year MMIP kind of, they're coming out with a report that is under an Assemblymember Ramos, I think it's 8399, that next year they're required to issue a report of recommendations, funding policy and all that specific to MMIP in California. And so that's what they've been doing in their regional listening sessions is specific to MMIP. And that was modeled off of also the earlier ICWA report that was done under then AG Harris and then Becerra, and led to the creation of the Office of Tribal Affairs at CESS and the ongoing work to do better on ICWA implementation in California. So those reports do lead to actual budget changes and policy changes. It just takes some time to materialize. And it would be great if they could cross-pollinate. And I do want to say, if you all provided testimony that you want incorporated in this already, we don't need to keep having those conversations. You can just send us what you already sent, and we'll just incorporate it as a +1 in this report. The PL 280 roundtable is part of both a state effort and a federal effort, because also Senator Padilla has brought it up in the context of the federal conversations and had a hearing at the federal Congress about what's going on with PL 280, because they're the ultimate authority over mandatory states. And so for context, there are 5 states that are mandatory, other states can opt in or out. And California is a mandatory state under federal law. And so both Padilla at the request of tribes and Assemblymember Ramos are looking at PL 280 implementation and also whether there's like something that needs to be done at the federal space or whether there's something that needs to be done at the state space. And so that's, I think, what their efforts are, is like not just MMIP, but in general, what is the state of public safety for Indian country, and is PL 280 the problem there? And so, you know, again, asking similar questions hopefully with better outcomes, either, that there's more funding that comes from the feds, I don't know about this political climate, or that the state actually starts stepping up and providing more resources to provide better coverage, better, trust across agencies, and better serve Indian country. So, I think that there will be something that comes out of all of this, but I understand it's like a lot of duplicative process and probably feels really annoying, and like you're hitting your head against the wall.
I was gonna mention, does this have, anything to do with the legislation with the cross-deputization bill? 'Cause, that was another thing that kind of, going back to talking about like us working together, it feels, with that bill, it kind of feels like we were kind of left out. If we are one of the largest tribes, then we should be standing with the largest tribes that are up there with these bills, because it's kind of being, a lot of things that we're thankful for that are being brought forward, are being constantly led by Miranda, or, Rosini, these other tribes, and then we're kind of just get left out, and, being one of the largest tribes, we should be included, as well as being one of the first tribes. That, I really think that it would be great to see at a federal level something being looked at, as far as Bill 280.
Well, with not my state hat on, I agree that it would be helpful for California tribes to have a better mechanism for furthering policy initiatives and legislative initiatives, especially when it comes to things that are gonna impact all tribes in the state. There are a couple of vehicles that do that, but they're different and they disagree, and there seems like there's some egos and power struggling, and I'm not gonna speak on that anymore. But, I agree. I think, if we, from our perspective, if we see something that has the support of the majority of tribes that are gonna be impacted, it's really hard to be like, nobody wants this. But when we see like that there's one tribe supporting and there's some issues that we're seeing that we're not sure have been, those questions have been asked, it's really challenging to figure out a path forward because it's harder to get amendments later once the law's passed, because people go, we fixed it, it's done, why do we need to look at this anymore? And so we, I think, on the state side, as Native people who are both attorneys and have advocated for things, also at national organizations, also in kind of consensus spaces, I think it's good. It's telling you to stop talking. But I think we always prefer when things come in more consensus, more thought, and that we have fewer questions because they've already been answered.
I was just gonna, for outside of, just to closing thoughts, I was thinking that, it'd be a beautiful thing for us when we talk about coming together, or what we can do at home locally is, I was really hurt that one of my tribal members, when our came to a council meeting, had said something to me where, I was really trying to fight for the protection of all of our UK territories, which, I appreciate, our Wailaki families who are standing up and fighting with the, we're fighting together for the protection of the Eel River, but I also have to thank my UP elders, for sharing those territories and like defining, we've had these conversations like what is the UP territories versus the Wailaki territories, and we need to come together, which is happening, as well as working with Lake and Trinity and Southern County. But, moving forward, it feels, so I was feeling really upset, hurt that, when I was talking about these other lands, like the coastal ones that, one of my relatives said, those are other UPs, they don't matter, they're not these UPs. And to me, we're all the same people, we're all the same UPs, we were connected to the Waco, people, and connected, and it just really bothered me because I walked into the store and the first people I seen were coastal people who were my relatives from here, so it's like, it doesn't make sense to me. So I would like to see for us to come to be able to support our non-federally recognized tribes. We know role to be recognized, and we, like you said, you know, if they're not gonna recognize them on their own, let's work on building together where we, as a tribe, can open our enrollment to include our relatives who are coastal Yukis and Wailakis from those Alder Point areas versus saying, oh no, they aren't the same people. They're our direct bloodlines. That's just an idea that I have out there for us to build together, is looking at our tribe and how do we open up we have the ability, you know, to open our enrollment if we so choose to as a tribe, if we bring it to whatever council.
Let's see, it's based upon living of the sand in our constitution. So those people out there are probably related to some of our original Latis and all that. That's how it gets started. Regardless of what tribe they're from. I mean, a lot of people that came in here were various tribes and they were given, you know, allotments during that era. I don't see, I mean, we'd have to kind of research it and check it out, but I don't see what would stop that.
Yeah.
Per capita checks would be smaller.
The elephant in the room for every tribe.
We don't even get that, just kidding.
I have a question, or like, not a question, but like, what's up? I hear that, you say the recent MMI.
Missing and murdered indigenous people.
Yeah, they're getting funding, but then I hear this, I didn't catch your first name, I'm just teasing right now too when I'm gonna say this, but we heard Mr. Tie Guy. He says that he's finding our grandparents with paperwork, and he has that desire and heart to do that for us. And then we have the MMI. Why, California, maybe you can put some funding toward him.
We're dead.
I'm for it.
We already gave you funding to do this.
I mean, maybe there's a connection, a blood, a DNA, something connection, you know. Our elders are missing, that's what I'm trying to say. Our young people, yeah, they're missing and we're trying to find them. But our elders are buried everywhere and they're missing. I never grew up with a grandmother until I got married. Then I had an actual grandmother. Never knew what that felt like. And then, but I know our younger generations, our graveyards are full of young grandmothers. And so I don't know where I'm going with all this except for, I think there's some kind of money out here, maybe, that could help.
Well, and I think you're making the
The
connection
healing part of
yeah,
it.
that I've been wanting someone to make, because that's one of the recommendations I wanted in here, is that, that piece of missing and murdered indigenous women, and then also people generally, that's this history. You know, the militia killings, that's murdered people. The rapes of our great-great-grandparents, that is a lot of our family tree.
I have a grandmother that has 3 families, but they were forced on her.
Yep. That's it. So like MMIP is not a new thing, it's actually part of this history.
Right, so is there like a big bridge we need to build to?
Sounds like you're building it and we'll put it in the report.
It recently was on, so one of the other areas I was interested in sharing, I'm sorry, you got your hand up too. But, you know, name changes, you know, I've been supportive of the Fort Bragg name changes for Covelo, and that was something that, you know, I brought up to the agency, recently this past week, is about, you know, talking about the Kelseys, the name is Kelsey, and how No,
We're not helping out.
the top of like the lineal or say historic and generational trauma. That is following our people, and yeah, you know, that name change is another one that is very important where, you know, it has to do with multiple counties where these men, you know, similar to like Grand Valley, have a story of where, you know, our food sovereignty was intentionally taken to start as part of the genocide. And then when our members went to go ran out of food to kind of eat and kill cattle, and then it started this big war. The same thing happened in Lake County where, you know, they waited until those, the men went to hunt on the Eel River at the headwaters to go and massacre the children and women. And so, you know, cultural resources and food sovereignty all have big key factors, but it's, you know, not only with that, but Serenius Hastings being the first California Chief Justice who came and harmed us, but the Kelseys were the first to be convicted for these murders, and then we got swept under the rug because there was nowhere to jail them, so crimes and, you know, put against them. So, you know, those name changes carry big burdens. I would really love to work on two of the name of the 10 mile left of Bloody Run Creek, which
I was about to say, I found that, I've actually found documentation of what happened there.
Deb has
And it
some
wasn't actually,
issues
and
too.
it didn't make it into Ben's book. He told me because he could only find one source and he had a higher standard of how many sources, primary sources he needed to have. So I wonder how many of those are actually everywhere across the state. But yeah, I called him when I found that, somebody had actually asked me about it. And, he said, yeah, I know about that one, but it wasn't in the book because I, you know, only had that one newspaper article instead of having to get the three primary sources you want to have. Which is, you know, it's sort of gets back to what we were saying about historians, archaeologists, and anthropologists.
Yeah.
They help us, and I'm a geographer, so I shouldn't even talk, but we help you to a certain point, but then if we are academics, which I've never really been an academic, I was a lecturer for a while, but they never really hired me anywhere. But if I was, you know, if I was trying to run a separate career with that set of standards that are Eurocentric, European, our universities were designed in Germany in the 1790s, you know, and so we have that value system that runs up against Native history, Native experience, Native trauma, and sometimes that doesn't work. And it's like we need a refugee like me from academia who understands a little bit about both sides of it to kind of say, okay, we need to know about, I mean, even if the American Historical Association has a standard of this many sources for something, we want to know. And if that creek is called Bloody Run Creek because it from the blood of your ancestors that ran down that creek, we want it to have its restored Yuki name. And it doesn't matter how many primary sources there are, even if it's just a story that's told in the tribe, pursue it.
Great, I love that. That was another thing that was, thank you for bringing that historic, you know, how, you know, we were talking about protecting cultural resources and historic resources, you know, how we can document that, or, you know, these historians.
That needs to change.
Yeah.
That's like, glorifying like the old hanging tree or something, you know, it's just not okay. And we go by it all the time, and it's, oh, good, they put the sign back up, it's like, okay.
Do you know who owns the land that the creek runs through? What combination of, is it BLM or? Could be BLM.
Probably
Okay,
private,
yeah,
yeah.
that could be an issue, but we
The
could.
railroad.
The county puts in those, bigger signs, right?
It would be easy to find out, but county reporters.
Yeah, of course, yeah. No, it's just you always gotta start somewhere. The thing about the federal naming authorities is that they do favor property owners. I say they're small R Republican because property owner is supreme, and then local government, and then, you know, the feds are at the bottom, right? They like authority to be at the lowest level possible, because that's what smaller republicanism is. So they always go to the property owner first. That's why at state parks, I'm lucky to be in a position to push name changes from the position I'm in the director's office, because we are the landowner, right? I mean, it sucks because we can't give the land back, but we are the landowner. And when the feds see, okay, this landowner wants a name change on their land, they're gonna favor it over a neighbor says, I wanna change a name or something on his land. Then we start running into problems. Anyway, we should do our research, let's talk. It's been too long anyway. I'll come on back here if you want. I miss being a co-host, so.
The federal government, has a mandate that anything that was named Squaw should be changed. And I know that east of, Lake Pillsbury, there's Squaw, Big Squaw Valley and Squaw Creek. And, we didn't get the information until after that, commission had made a decision to go ahead with the Potter Valley Pomos, what are they called? The yeah. And so, because they spoke up and we did, and Round Valley didn't speak up to that fact, anthropologists, all of that is Yuki territory. But yet, all of that whole commission, even the guy that called me, and he's a secretary of the Native American Heritage Commission, and I spoke with him, and he goes, we knew it was yours, and yet he voted to make it Potter Valley's name rather than the white people that have been there since 1907, the mother that bought that land for her son. And so when you're changing those names, it would be really apropos if it was the people that it actually came from, not their neighbors south of there that narked on the Yukis that were hiding and they got killed at Bloody Rock. And so yeah, that would be nice if we could do that.
So
we're appealing it though, we're appealing that. Yeah, we're appealing it.
So I was listening in on that committee meeting when that was going down and you know, thinking about it. The way the task force dealt with the secretary's order. Now, first of all, there's only been 3 times in history that the secretary's order removed the word from the map. This was the 3rd time it happened. The first time was 1963 with the N-word, 6-letter N-word, which they unfortunately replaced with 5-letter N-word across the board pretty much. So now we're dealing with that. And then in 1975, at the time that reparations were being sought for Japanese Americans who were interned, the word, a shortened version of Japanese was also removed from the map at that time. Those are the 2 times in the past that this occurred. And then of course the world in 2022, when that word came down, was a lot different from the world in 1975 when the last one came down. There were a lot more S words on the map. I think that the N-word might have had it beat back in the old days, but the S word was really, there were 666. They said over 600 in all the press releases because they didn't want to write down the number, but the actual number was 666. Anyway, and this is actually a recommendation, I'm sorry, now I'm talking, you got me talking, but this is a recommendation that we just voted on last month in Rapid City, which is that we need a better way to, when we do these orders, to choose the replacement names. Because, you know, they were basically pulling, we don't even know how the task force chose a lot of those names. They didn't document it. They didn't say, oh, this is on page 667 of volume 8 of the Smithsonian Handbook or anything like that. It's just a name. It's like, maybe it's native, I don't know, it's a bunch of letters. And that is really something that needs to be improved in consultation. I can somewhat proudly say that we at Parks, because I was there, and probably for no other reason, we got ahead of it. And we found all 9 instances that were still within our boundaries, and we were able to do full consultation before the order was enacted and get replacement names ahead of time. But unless you have, just a completely random accident, basically that I was where I was at that time, and I'm like, hey, I'm a geographer, I can search the GIS in a meeting, and that's literally where that came from. It's just not gonna happen. So Anyway, I would love to come back up and do an entire seminar on place names with you if you want. Because I could obviously talk about it for 3 more hours and we're already over time.
One more thing I wanna add, and we are very over time, and I wanna make sure that people get to film Loretta, if possible, if nobody's worn out yet, is, this conversation and, how are we talking about the histories when we're talking even about place name changes? And I bring it up because a lot of times we are looking at like the American version of what happened, and it tends to completely dehumanize the people that were murdered. And so if we could also think about, even when we're providing support for place name changes, even when we're providing support for changes generally to policy, if we can talk about it in a way that is not taking away our humanity and not talking about it from like the aggressor's perspective and like kind of this gross, I don't know, distance. Like the story I heard from you today, I heard from a non-native person telling that story with zero context that this is like someone's relative and that the people still, you know, like, and it was really, for me, jarring to hear that in the context of like a presentation without any sort of like, for people in the room who are descendants of this is gonna be hard to hear, and like, you know, we're in a space where this is what we're talking about and it's our relations, and so it has that humanity, and we're here prepared to talk about it. But, you know, as we move forward in these spaces and as we move forward with change, if we can start thinking about how we change the language around our own histories, because most of them are told from the perspective of people who didn't consider us human, or our grandmas or great-great-grandmas, and think about what it would look like for us to reclaim our relatives on paper and in our histories, and what does that look like giving them due deference? You know, like, we don't talk about like the old white dudes that died in wars, like it was like just 3 white dudes died in war, you know, or like 3 white dudes were, you know, disemboweled or something. Like, that language just talked about our relatives, and so how do we change it so that people give our relatives the respect that they deserve when they were fighting for their homelands and their people?
One news reporter said, when the Richard Oates and these guys jumped into the ocean from San Francisco to the Alcatraz, he said, well, I guess in the end of the day, we just got a few wet Indians. Where's the heart of it? They were trying to do something. You know, so I hear you.
Well, it's gotta be, if we're gonna change our curriculum and tell our true stories, it's not gonna always be native people in the classroom. You know, it has to have integrity for everyone to be able to teach that curriculum. And for it to be talked about in a good way, and so that's, you know, teachers need to go through, you know, your credentialing programs and all that, that needs to happen, that needs to be part of it. Because otherwise, it could be people that have no, you know, no heart, or they don't care about it or something, and so it's just told in a way that's, disrespectful.
And it probably will be that way for a while.
Yeah, it will be for a while.
Well, I can relate to that, you know, being, you know, I had to instruct this semester for teaching criminal justice with our junior college, and I was so very thankful for our deans to, and my, you know, leads to allow me to teach what I knew. I got to teach on Indian law versus, you know, I'm like, okay, this is what the Constitution, here's the Constitution, but it was all based on, you know, it was based on commerce and how to take the property of tribal people and how to manage it. And everybody was like, oh, okay, this is what kind of classes they wanted to hear about it. But you know, going back to that education bill that was probably built after the year 2006 and 2022, I have been asked by these 2 Cause they're just like, wait, what? You know, and then they didn't even know. You know, they some of the school districts don't even know about the spreads.
We're 45 minutes over time.
Chief?
I just wanted to, clarify something here, is that there are about 67 tribes applying for recognition and have been in the process since 1980, and nobody in California has achieved that. And it's not because they don't know their history, or they don't know where they're from, or they don't know who they're related to. It's because the process is not built to recognize anybody. And so it isn't that people, and for us, it's like, we are a traditional run tribe with, successional leadership in place still. And so we are opposed to applying to the BIA to adopt another governmental process of organizing the tribal structure, just because as we look around the country, it's like that process is not working. That process is leaving out their own people. That process is being corrupted so easily that the traditional people are left out of anything, and only the voted in councils are making deals that the traditional people are not supporting. And so we are opposed to that. We don't want to be colonized like that. We want our sovereignty, and we want our rights to hold eagle feathers, to hold ceremonies where we want them, to gather our medicines as we need them, but not by BIA approvals. It's like we know where our land is, we know where our things are, and the sovereignty issue is now still being discussed at the UN level. They're in Geneva this week talking about the rights of indigenous peoples and their governance. And the BIA is there, NCAI is there, NARF is there, all advocating for only recognized tribes should have that for the United States, have a governance right. But we're also there saying indigenous peoples that are tribally led still need to be represented at the UN levels in a governance equal status to acknowledge indigenous peoples around the world who, one, are not even discovered yet. I mean, you saw the meme on Facebook today, they flew over and saw some unincorporated individuals, you know, it's like, and people are saying, leave them alone. They don't need your churches, they don't need your food, they don't need your commodities. It's like, just leave them alone, leave them alone. Because they're not asking for help. They're not coming out of the woodwork saying, oh, please come save us. But that's the situation of, the issue here is that all of those 67 tribes that are trying for recognition in this state, along with the 107 or 12 tribes that are already existing, most of the tribes in the United States are here in California. If they allowed those other 67 to be tribes. And they're on the Kelsey map. They're on the map from the very beginning. Their territories are outlined. The book of genocide includes, you know, massacres in their area, just like in our area. All of the things that happen to the recognized tribes happen to all of the tribes in California. And that's the separation of who's gonna defend the territories of the unrecognized tribes if all of these laws change for only recognized tribes. Who's gonna come to the McCloud River and defend our sacred places if we are not able to do that and have a right to do that? And right now, you know, we break the law every time we hold a ceremony. But that's not right, that we can't even hold our own ceremony we can't close it to the public because what, we're not Indians. And that gets so old, and when you talk about the MMIP or the COVID funds, or the roads, or the housing, it's like, we don't get any of that. We don't even get considered for any part of that. Yet we have, you know, issues that need to be addressed, and should be, because, you know, the whole fight for 50 years for California lands included us too. In fact, we were one of the people, the tribes who went back to Washington to file those papers, to say California doesn't have any land to live on. Everybody is, you know, given the land, and even the farmers are saying, well, you guys can't come gather acorns because we need that for our hogs. We were all in that same situation. All of the massacres are in that same situation. All of the loss of land and what has happened to this point, we all experienced that. But now we have this situation of unrecognized. Who allows that? That's like saying the slaves. It's equal, because it's a term given to annihilate people. It's cultural genocide to not even try to assist them and their kids. I mean, we're hanging on by a thread for Indian help, right? And that is what NCAI is trying to change. They're trying to change even being members of NCAI, because the federally recognized tribes are the important ones, and all the other tribes in California are not, because they're, you know, in Cherokee Nation says if they're not tribes already, we don't really want them to become tribes.
Kenny, was your tribe able to get tribal for these solutions?
No. We wrote for that, for the fish, but there is a hang up. We wrote for 15 million for a fishery to bring back the winter run fish and do some restoration of the river. But we got 2 million was the award, and so now we have to figure out what it is that we want to do with that. But the catch is, it has to be public access, and it has to be no building. So both of those things are a problem.
Yeah, but that's something I'm talking about. Public access can be defined by the tribe.
Right.
So,
But just that it's there
I know.
is not land
All these
back.
strings attached, but then.
I mean, if you're gonna give land back, give it to us to organize and do the best that we can for our people. Don't put restrictions on it, otherwise keep it.
And then
You know?
I was also told that there's, like, it doesn't count towards, like, the appraisals and things for
Yeah.
some people, but there's, I was told another tribe on the coast put in for it, got it, and it doesn't count for the appraisal, so they've lost their land. Because it was posted.
They won't purchase over the appraised value, is what
Right.
it is.
Which
So
is,
if you get, we kinda ran into that too, we're like, oh shoot. The landowner wants more than the appraised value, but as it turned out, it worked out for us. Or some
yeah,
miracle. But,
yeah.
but it could have been that we would have had to look for another piece of property if it was over the appraised value because of the state.
Right, if you have that option. But for Karina Gold and the Ohlone people in Berkeley and the Shell Mound, that's where the Shell Mound is.
Oh, okay.
They are probably the only ones in the world who would have bought that Shell Mound for $27 million. 2.8 acres. That is criminal.
Well, I think that's why the HOA solutions was designed so that landowners couldn't create like a crazy price on the land. And so that like it was for willing sellers that would sell at the appraised value versus like, oh, there's this opportunity, now we're gonna charge the tribe 3 times this, and the tribe isn't even able to do whatever it wants on this land, so it's just like
years, it's even been an opportunity to get it. However, the current owners bought it at $36 million as a political investment. So now they want $40 million for that piece of land. The appraised value is gonna fall far less than that. But, so the money that we have, we're hoping that we can just transfer it into programmatic use rather than land purchase, because it's not gonna appraise. It is the only river that we would get, and it's the best place for salmon to be recovered. So you're stuck. It's like, we're not a tribe that wants, just a piece of land somewhere. We want specific pieces of land that put intact our tribal beginnings and endings. It's like, if, all of us can't go back to a country, like all the other ethnic groups in this country, can go back to their country and be immersed in their way of life, speak their language, eat their foods, we don't really have that. What we have is the only place in the world that we can actually be the tribe that we are. And so this Balibaka has several villages. It was the last inhabited village before the dams came in. And it would be like the country we could go back to be immersed in minimum into life, and knowing and getting the knowledge and having a peace of mind and our river and the fish back. And the fish is really beneficial to the entire state. And so that's the problems with recognition, in addition to the current trend of recognition that's hitting all across Indian country, that is not what we should be doing, having memberships. And
and then people kicking each other off.
right, kicking each other off, it's disgraceful.
If I were on the panel, I approved $30 million.
But it should be the concern of all of us. I mean,
Yeah.
every federally recognized tribe has members who are relatives who are not on that list. And we should not have that. We should not stand for that. We should not put up with that. California should have been different than any other the states, just like Alaska and Hawaii. That California has 135 or more dialects of language. No other state has that. Look at how many tribes we have here. I mean, it's kind of silly in some ways because the lower Wintu tribes are all related. They're all sister, the Calusa chairman at one point in time was the brother of Rumsey's Paula chairman, who was the niece and nephew of Cortinas chairman, who was the cousin of Grindstone. They are all one family, but they're different tribes. They have the same mother and father, but they're different tribes. And the same with the Maidu, Moortown, Enterprise, Feather. It's like they're all the same family, but because of this process we have, and because of the rancheria system that was started in the 20s because no people had any land of the homeless Indians, now we have all these micro tribal units like in Redding. It's like, there's no history of Redding Rancheria tribe. They don't have a history. But they're a tribe, and when they became a tribe, all of the Wintus around it became invisible. And these things are not right. It's not right in this state.
What tribe is the Shasta tribe? Are they Wintu?
No.
What is their?
They claim Shasta, but
It's just Shasta?
yeah, I guess.
So I'm gonna just pull us back.
Yeah.
This is not really in compliance with our principles. We don't like to call out individual tribes and individual people, so we might actually redact this from our record.
Yeah.
I
we're still trying to get back the New Zealand eggs, which were taken to New Zealand in the early 1900s. And they are the fish that are wild in New Zealand, the only wild fish, because most of the fish in the Sacramento River are hatchery raised. And so we want the fish from New Zealand because one, they can climb the mountain. And the fish going up to McLeod, they have to climb a mountain, they have to climb up 5,000 feet. Not just the valley floor swim, but they have to be able to jump, and the New Zealand salmon still have that gene, still have the DNA of the fish that did that. And we have hatchery fish, and we're trying to retrain, if possible, putting them in the McLeod to imprint them to the McLeod River water to go out and next year should be the first group that comes back. But now we have the process of like getting the adult salmon approved by the CTHC to go back into the river to swim up to Adena where they were hatched. But that's science.
And the fires are not affecting the fish family?
No, not yet. But close. Climate change and the glacier melt. And PG&E Dam.
I think the testimony that you provided today has helped to inform the state about the history of this land, your people, your families, and your ideas and hopes and dreams for the future. And I just want to say, Kamosh, thank you to all of you. I'm humbled to be here, and I think the fact that you came today demonstrates your courage, resiliency, and hopefulness for the future, and I'm honored to have been here.
Thank you.